Hannah Whitaker arrived in Cape Charles with one suitcase, $14, and a promise that died before she stepped off the bus. Then a retired Navy SEAL with haunted eyes and a German shepherd who trusted almost no one stopped in the storm, looked at the woman everyone else had already dismissed, and offered her a door that was not yet a home. Rain came sideways across Cape Charles, Virginia on a Thursday evening in late November, hard enough to make the bus station windows tremble in their frames and turn the harbor lights into yellow smears beyond the glass. The air smelled of wet pavement, saltwater diesel, and old coffee that had sat too long on a warmer behind the ticket counter. Hannah Claire Whitaker stood beneath the narrow metal awning with her suitcase in one hand and the last good piece of her old life folded inside her coat pocket, soft from being opened too many times. She had traveled 3 days from Marietta, Ohio, on buses that coughed through the mountains, idled behind weather delays, and stopped in towns where the vending machines hummed louder than the people. She had slept with her chin against her collarbone, woken with her neck stiff and her shoes damp, and told herself at every state line that the road was leading somewhere decent. A man named Thomas Reed had written 4 letters in a careful hand. He owned a small inn near the ferry landing. He was widowed, respectable, overworked. He needed help with the rooms, the books, the breakfasts, and perhaps, if God led 2 lonely people toward the same table, a future. Hannah had not answered the part about the future in her first letter. She had been careful. Carefulness had become the fence around her heart after her husband died on the Ohio River and left her with a rented room, a debt ledger, and neighbors who spoke softly as if grief were a sleeping child they were afraid to wake. But Thomas had written again, not flowery, not rushed. He said Cape Charles was quiet in winter, that the sea air did a body good, that honest work waited for honest hands. He said, "Come before December if you can. I would rather meet you in person than keep promising on paper." So Hannah came before December. She came with one suitcase, $14 after fares and sandwiches, a blue cotton dress wrapped in brown paper, and a little tin of her mother's ginger biscuits tucked between stockings. She came having prayed not for romance exactly, but for a place where her usefulness might be seen before her loneliness was. Thomas Reed arrived 8 minutes after the bus hissed away into the rain. Hannah recognized him from the photograph he had mailed, though the man in front of her seemed smaller than the man on paper, not in body, but in courage. He wore a dark wool coat and a black hat held low against the weather. Beside him stood a woman with smooth blonde hair tucked beneath a green scarf, her gloved hand resting on his sleeve in a way that answered the question before Hannah asked it. Thomas stopped at the edge of the awning. Water ran from the brim of his hat. His mouth moved once before sound came out. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, and there was a sadness in his voice that offended her more than anger would have. Hannah shifted the suitcase to her other hand. "Mr. Reed." The blonde woman looked at Hannah's suitcase, then at Hannah's face, then away toward the street, as if the weather had become very interesting. Thomas cleared his throat. "I sent a letter." Hannah felt the cold reach through her coat lining and settle against the middle of her back. "I did not receive it." "I was afraid of that." He glanced toward the woman beside him. "This is Caroline, my wife." The word landed without drama. That was the terrible part. No thunder cracked, no window shattered. The rain simply kept falling, patient and indifferent, while Hannah understood that the bridge she had crossed in good faith had been taken apart behind her without warning. "Your wife," she repeated. 3 weeks ago, Thomas said. "It happened quickly. Her aunt fell ill and there were circumstances." He stopped, perhaps hearing how foolish circumstances sounded when offered to a woman soaked at the edge of a closed bus station. "I meant to make it right." Hannah looked past him toward the narrow street where most of the storefronts had already gone dark. A hardware sign swung in the wind. A neon vacancy sign across the block flickered once and gave up. Her hands did not shake, which surprised her. Inside, something was shaking. Her hands, at least, had manners. You asked me to come before December. I know. You said there would be work. I know. You knew I was traveling alone. Thomas swallowed. Caroline tightened her grip on his arm. I can give you some money for a room tonight. He reached into his coat. That was when Hannah's dignity, which had been standing very still and very cold, picked up its skirt and walked forward. She opened her purse, removed the loose bills and coins she had not spent on the trip, counted them without looking down, and found $14.36. She took out $3 because 3 was enough to make a point and not enough to ruin her, and dropped them at Thomas Reed's polished shoes. The bills darkened immediately in the rain. The coins clicked against the concrete, bright little sounds in the storm. Keep it, she said. Buy yourself a prayer if a conscience costs more. Thomas stared at the money. Caroline made a small sound. Hannah closed her purse, lifted her suitcase, and walked away before either of them could mistake her for someone waiting to be comforted. The bus station door was locked behind her. The ticket clerk had gone home at 6, and the schedule pasted to the glass said the next northbound bus would not come until Saturday afternoon, weather permitting. Weather, from what Hannah could see, had no intention of permitting anything. She went first to the inn because pride was expensive and shelter was necessary, but the sign in Thomas Reed's window was dark, and Caroline had reached the porch ahead of him. Hannah saw them inside through lace curtains, saw the little lobby lamps, saw Thomas remove his wet hat and stand with it in both hands, like a boy caught stealing. Caroline looked toward the window. Hannah turned before their eyes met. She tried the Sea Glass Motel 2 blocks down, but a handwritten note on the office door said closed for repairs until spring. She tried a place called the Pelican Rest, which had 3 porch rockers chained together against the wind and no one answering the bell. At the corner, she stepped into Pike's Marine Supply because the windows glowed and because the rain had started sliding down the back of her neck. Warm air brushed her face. Ropes hung from pegs. Lanterns, rain slickers, crab traps, bait buckets, marine radios, coils of chain, tins of biscuits, and jars of penny candy filled the narrow aisles. Behind the counter, Owen Pike looked up from a ledger with the expression of a man who believed every stranger arrived carrying inconvenience. He was thick through the middle, with a red nose and a neat gray beard, and he wore suspenders over a shirt that had once been white. Evening, he said, making the word smaller than it needed to be. Evening, Hannah replied. Water dripped from the hem of her coat onto the floorboards. Owen looked at it. Storm's rough. It is. You come in on that delayed Richmond bus? Yes. You, the woman Thomas Reed was expecting? There it was. Cape Charles might have been small, but gossip traveled in weather that stopped engines. Hannah set her suitcase beside her boot, lifted her chin by an inch, and felt the old Ohio part of herself come awake. The part that had bargained with creditors and funeral men and landlords who suddenly remembered repairs they had once promised. I was. Owen's brows rose. Was. Mr. Reed's situation changed. It did at that. He tapped the pencil against the ledger. People heard it might. Hannah counted 3 breaths. I'm looking for a room until the buses run again. Most places shut down this time of year. Ferry traffic slows, tourists vanish, and folks here have family. He said family the way some people said credentials. The church sometimes opens the fellowship hall in a bad freeze, but Pastor Emmett's gone to Norfolk with his wife. Medical appointment. Is there a boarding house? Not anymore. Old Mrs. Tully used to take people in, but her daughter moved her to Roanoke last summer. He leaned on the counter, studying her face as if deciding whether misfortune had made her interesting enough to keep. You got kin nearby? No. Money? Enough for a modest room if one existed. Station's locked, yes. Bus won't come till Saturday if the bridge doesn't flood. Hannah's throat tightened, but her voice stayed even. Then I appreciate your time. She picked up the suitcase. Ma'am, Owen said,
and there was a change in him, not kindness exactly.
More like a man who did not want to be the last person who had seen a woman before the storm swallowed her pride and perhaps more than pride. No sense walking around out there. You could wait here a bit. Hannah's hand was on the door. And give the town a better window to watch through. Owen blinked. For 1 second he had the grace to look ashamed. Then the bell over the door rang behind her before she could open it. The wind came in first. After it came a German shepherd large, sable-coated rein shining on the black saddle of his back ears, high, eyes intelligent and too serious for an animal who had simply entered a store. He paused inside the doorway and looked at Hannah as if he had been sent to inspect the part of the evening no one else wanted to touch. Behind him stepped a man carrying the weather on his shoulders. He was tall, broad, without softness, in a navy coat darkened by rain with close-cropped brown hair and the kind of still face that did not invite questions. A faded scar touched his jaw near the left ear. His eyes went to the corners of the room first, then the aisles, then Owen, then Hannah, and only then did he close the door. The dog remained near Hannah's suitcase. "Ranger," the man said quietly. The dog flicked one ear but did not move. Owen straightened. "Caleb Mercer. You're late to be out. Needed lamp oil, batteries, gauze, and 2 cans of that coffee my mother says tastes like punishment but drinks anyway." His voice was low, rough at the edge and dry enough that Hannah almost smiled despite herself. Almost. Owen reached beneath the counter for a sack. "Evelyn still having trouble with her hands?" "Cold makes it worse." The man Caleb moved through the store with the economy of someone who disliked wasted motion. Not hurried, not slow. Certain. Ranger stayed by the suitcase. Hannah looked down at him. The dog looked back. His eyes were amber brown, steady and unblinking. "Your dog appears to have made a decision," she said. Caleb stopped beside a shelf of lantern wicks and turned. For the first time, he looked at her properly. Not the suitcase, not the wet coat. Her. He does that. About strangers, about weathered doors, men with bad tempers and strangers. Owen made a small, amused sound. "This here is Mrs. Whitaker. Came for Thomas Reed." Caleb's face did not change, but the air around him did. It went quieter. "I heard enough." Owen looked pleased with himself. "Whole town will by breakfast." Caleb set the lantern wicks on the counter. "Then breakfast will be poorer for it." Hannah felt the sentence land somewhere behind her ribs. It was not a rescue. It was not pity. It was a man refusing to laugh where laughter had been expected. Owen busied himself with the sack. Caleb paid in cash, lifted the supplies, and moved toward the door. Ranger did not follow. Caleb stopped. "Ranger." The dog stepped closer to Hannah and touched his nose very lightly to the side of her suitcase. Not sniffing now. Marking a fact. Caleb watched him for a long moment. "You have somewhere to go tonight?" he asked. Hannah's answer came fast because fear hated being seen. "I'll manage." That wasn't the question. "No," she said after a pause. "I don't." Rain rattled against the windows. Owen pretended to check his ledger, though his pencil had not moved. Caleb shifted the sack of supplies in his arm. "I live at Mercer Point, 3 miles past the old Coast Guard road. My mother is there and my 2 nieces, 7-year-old twins. Their mother was my sister." He said it plainly, but the plainness cost him something. Hannah heard the price in the small pause after sister. "The storm knocked one of our windows loose. My mother's hands are bad, and the girls have been running the house by pure argument since noon. We need help tonight, maybe tomorrow. You need a roof. I can offer a room with a lock-up, a breakfast, and a ride back here when the bus runs." Hannah stared at him. "You make a habit of collecting women from marine stores?" "No." "Good. I also do not make a habit of leaving them outside in nor'easters because another man lost his manners. Owen cleared his throat. Caleb did not look at him. Hannah studied the dog because the man was too difficult to study directly. Ranger stood with his body angled toward the door, but his head turned toward her as if he understood that the next step belonged to her. "You do not know me," she said. "I know you dropped $3 at Thomas Reed's feet instead of crying on his porch." That story improved quickly. Stories do that when Owen touches them. Owen opened his mouth. Caleb glanced at him. Owen closed it. Hannah's palm tightened around the suitcase handle. "I am a widow. My husband died 2 years ago. I have been working in kitchens, sick rooms, and laundry rooms since. I came here for work first, whatever Thomas Reed imagined second." "I will not be mistaken for a desperate woman looking to be kept." Caleb nodded once. "I am a retired Navy SEAL. I have more habits than charm, most of them inconvenient. Ranger was my working dog overseas and is now retired, which he ignores. My sister died last year, and I have been raising her daughters badly enough that my mother has not yet forgiven me for trying to do it alone. I am not offering romance, rescue, or charity. I am offering a practical trade between two people who can still stand upright in bad weather." Hannah looked at the rain. She looked at Owen, who would tell this story by morning whether she stood in the storm or rode away from it. She looked at Caleb Mercer, who had put every warning label on himself before inviting her anywhere near him. Then she looked at Ranger. The dog gave a soft huff, as if the matter was taking longer than necessary. A laugh surprised her, short and small, gone almost before it arrived. Caleb's mouth moved at one corner, not quite a smile. "Just until the buses run," Hannah said. "Just until the buses run," he agreed. He opened the door, and the storm rushed in again. Hannah stepped into it beside a stranger following a German shepherd whose paws found the flooded sidewalk as if the night had been mapped for him alone. Caleb's truck waited at the curb, an old dark pickup with a blanket on the passenger seat and a row of children's drawings tucked above the visor. He opened the door for her, then gave her the space to climb in without touching her elbow. Ranger leaped into the back seat, shook rain across the floor mat, and settled with his head between the front seats. Hannah put her suitcase at her feet and pulled the damp coat tighter around herself. Through the store window she saw Owen Pike, watching his face pale in the yellow light, already arranging the scene into something more useful to his tongue than the truth. Caleb started the engine. The radio crackled with a weather warning and then dissolved into static. He turned it off. For a while there was only the wiper blades, the rain, the dogs breathing, and the road vanishing beneath sheets of water. Hannah kept her hands folded in her lap so Caleb would not see them tremble. She had walked away from one closed door with her head up. Now she was riding toward another door, and she did not know whether it would open onto mercy, trouble, or merely a warmer room in which to discover that the world could still embarrass her. Caleb drove with both hands on the wheel. "If Ranger bothers you, tell him off." "Will he listen?" "Better than most people." "That is not a high standard tonight." This time Caleb did smile briefly, and it changed his face so much that Hannah looked away. Outside, the town thinned into marsh grass, black water, and low houses huddled against the storm. Ahead somewhere, beyond the reach of the headlights, Mercer Point waited. Behind them, in the warm store window, Owen Pike lifted the telephone receiver from the wall. Ranger raised his head and gave one quiet sound from deep in his chest. Caleb's eyes went to the rearview mirror. "I know," he said softly. Hannah looked back, but the road behind them had already disappeared into rain. The road to Mercer Point ran along the edge of low marshland where the rain had filled the ditches until they looked like dark ribbons laid beside the asphalt, and the wind pushed silver sheets of water across the headlights so fast that Hannah could not tell where the lane ended and the drowned grass began. Cape Charles had vanished behind them in less than 5 minutes. That unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. Towns, even cruel ones, had windows. Roads had only distance. She sat with her suitcase pressed against her ankles and Ranger's warm breath moving between the seats, counting the turns, because counting had steadied her through worse nights than this. 3 turns after the last street lamp. 1 narrow bridge with water foaming below. A mailbox shaped like a small white boat. A long line of cedar trees bending in the same direction, as if the storm had taught them obedience. Caleb drove without filling the silence, which Hannah appreciated and distrusted at the same time. Men who talked too much usually wanted to sell you something. Men who said too little sometimes expected you to imagine the best of them. Caleb seemed to expect nothing, and expectation had become such a common tax on Hannah's life that its absence felt suspicious. Ranger rested his chin on the back of her seat. Every time the truck hit a flooded patch, one of his ears twitched against her shoulder. "He always ride like that?" she asked after a while. "Only when he thinks the passenger needs supervision. I have been supervised by church ladies, hotel clerks, creditors, doctors, and one elderly neighbor who believed soup could solve legal matters. I am not sure I require a dog to join the committee." Caleb's hands stayed steady on the wheel, but she saw that small pull at the side of his mouth again. "Ranger doesn't join committees. He chairs them." The answer was so dry, so unexpected that Hannah almost laughed. Instead, she looked out at the road. "How long since you left the Navy?" 3 years. He seemed to consider whether more was required. "Ranger retired 6 months after I did. He disagreed with the paperwork." The dog made a quiet sound. "He has opinions," Hannah said. "Strong ones." "About me?" "Apparently favorable, which is inconvenient." "For whom?" "Both of us, maybe." That ended the conversation in a way that did not feel rude. Hannah watched the headlights find a wooden sign at the mouth of a gravel lane, Mercer Point Rescue and Repair, hand-painted in navy blue letters, with a small lighthouse drawn beneath. Beyond the sign, the lane rose a little and past a low building with a wide garage door, 2 boat trailers, stacked crab pots, a locked fuel cabinet, and a pole where an American flag snapped hard enough to sound like cloth tearing. Farther on stood the house, larger than she expected, weathered gray with white trim, built in the square-shouldered style of homes that had survived enough storms to stop being surprised by them. Warm light glowed in the kitchen windows. A porch lamp swung on its chain. On the far side of the yard, half hidden by rain and scrub pines, stood a small lighthouse no taller than a silo, old private, and dark. Its glass room caught the truck lights and flashed once, like an eye opening and closing. Hannah found herself staring at it. Caleb noticed. "My grandfather built that after he came home from Korea. It never guided anything official, just made him feel useful." "Does it work?" "Almost." The answer had weight. He did not explain it. The truck stopped beside the porch. Before Hannah could reach for her suitcase, the front door opened and a woman stepped into the frame, holding a towel in one hand and suspicion in the other. She was tall, despite the slight bend at her shoulders, with silver hair braided down her back and a face that looked built for truth more than comfort. Her cardigan was buttoned wrong by one hole. Her wrists were wrapped in soft braces, and her eyes moved from Caleb to Hannah to Ranger so quickly that Hannah understood she had once worked in rooms where noticing fast mattered. "Caleb Nathaniel Mercer," the woman called over the rain. "If that is another broken radio, wet sailor, or stray pelican, it can sleep in the rescue shed." "Not a pelican," Caleb said, climbing out. "A woman." The woman's mouth tightened. That answer has never improved a situation in the history of mankind. Hannah stepped down from the truck before Caleb could open her door and lifted her suitcase herself. The rain hit her scalp, cold and immediate. Ranger jumped down beside her, then trotted up the steps and sat near the older woman's feet as if presenting evidence. Caleb came around the hood with the supply sack. "Mother, this is Mrs. Hannah Whitaker. She was stranded in town after Reed failed to honor an arrangement. She needs shelter until the buses run." We need help in the house until this storm breaks. The woman looked at Hannah for a long moment. Evelyn Mercer, Mrs. Mercer. Do not Mrs. Mercer me while dripping on my porch. Come in before the floor gets jealous of the yard. Hannah entered a kitchen that seemed to have been built around the stove. Heat rolled toward her, smelling of chicken broth, coffee, wet wool, wood smoke, and something sweet hiding under a cloth near the counter. Copper pans hung above an island scarred by decades of knives. Children's boots lay sideways near the back door. A half-folded pile of towels sat in a basket. On the table were 2 school books, a jar of buttons, a small flashlight in pieces, and a drawing of a lighthouse, colored with fierce yellow strokes. The room was not tidy. It was alive. That made Hannah ache in a place she had not meant to bring with her. Evelyn shut the door against the storm and turned to Caleb. Explain without pretending this was an ordinary decision. Caleb set the supplies down. Owen told her there was nowhere to stay. Station was locked. Reed is newly married. I know about Reed. Evelyn's eyes sharpened. Mara called. Half the town knows about Reed. Hannah's wet fingers tightened around the suitcase handle. Caleb saw it. So did Evelyn. The older woman's face changed by almost nothing, but her voice lost a little of its blade when she addressed Hannah. Did he leave you with money? He offered. I declined. Evelyn's eyebrows rose. That was either pride or wisdom. Tonight it was both. For the first time, Evelyn's eyes warmed by 1 degree. Can you cook? Yes. Can you make biscuits without turning them into doorstops? Usually. Can you sit with a feverish child without making either the child or the Lord nervous? Yes. Caleb looked down at the floor, and Hannah suspected he was hiding another smile. Evelyn caught him. Do not look entertained. You brought home a guest in a storm without warning me, which means you have used up your amusement for the evening. Yes, ma'am. From the hallway came a whisper that made no attempt to remain hidden. Is she pretty? Another whisper, softer. You cannot ask that where she can hear. I did not ask her. I asked you. Evelyn closed her eyes for 1 patient second. Girls! 2 children appeared at the edge of the kitchen, shoulder to shoulder in flannel pajamas. They were not identical in the easy storybook way, but anyone could see they had begun life together. Both had dark blonde hair, gray-blue eyes, and narrow faces that still carried baby softness at the cheeks. One stood on her toes, leaning forward as if the world were a stage and she had arrived early for the best seat. The other held a small metal badge against her chest and watched from behind her sister's shoulder. I'm Lily, said the first. She's June. She talks, but not always when people want her to. Uncle Caleb says that is a tactical advantage. Bed, Caleb said. We were in bed, Lily replied. We relocated because of new information. Ranger patted to June and nudged her hand. June did not look away from Hannah, but her fingers moved into the fur behind his ear. Hannah understood then that the dog was not merely beloved in this house. He was a bridge, the sort no one admitted needing. I'm Hannah, she said. Mrs. Whitaker, if your grandmother prefers manners. Aunt Evelyn is our grandmother, but we call her Evie when she is not listening, Lily said. Evelyn sighed. I am always listening. Then why do you let us? Because one day you will be old enough to realize Evelyn is a perfectly good name and Evie sounds like a sneeze. Lily considered that. Do you make pancakes? I do. Can you make them shaped like turtles? Not on purpose. Lily looked impressed. Better. Surprises are more realistic. June's gaze dropped to Hannah's suitcase. Are you staying? The question was quieter than Lily's, but deeper. It came from the part of a child that had learned arrivals could be temporary and departures could be permanent. Hannah chose her words with care. Until the buses run again, and only if your grandmother allows it. June looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at Ranger, which Hannah found both absurd and entirely understandable. Ranger sat down beside Hannah's wet suitcase and placed one paw on it. Lily gasped.
He voted.
Caleb rubbed a hand over his face. That is not how decisions work. It is how Ranger works, Lily said. Evelyn studied the dog, then Hannah. Room at the end of the hall. Lock sticks unless you lift the handle. Towels are in the cupboard. Supper is broth unless someone with younger hands wants to turn the biscuits before they burn. I can do that, Hannah said. After you get dry, the biscuits will not wait for my dignity. Evelyn's mouth moved in a way that might have become a smile if she had allowed it a larger budget. Then hang your coat by the stove and wash your hands. Caleb started to lift the suitcase, stopped himself, and looked at Hannah. May I? The question mattered. It mattered so much that for one foolish second Hannah nearly cried, not because a suitcase was heavy, but because someone had remembered it belonged to her. Yes, she said. Thank you. He carried it down the hall while Hannah removed her coat. Steam rose faintly from the wool. She rolled up her sleeves, washed at the sink, and found the oven cloth without being told. The biscuits were pale but salvageable. She turned them, brushed the tops with a little melted butter she found beside the stove, and slid them back into the heat. Evelyn watched every motion. So did Lily. June watched Ranger watching Hannah. That was a different examination entirely. Supper was eaten at the kitchen table while the storm pressed its palms against the windows. Caleb sat with his back to the wall, a habit so old it no longer looked deliberate. Ranger lay where he could see the doors. Evelyn ate slowly because her fingers hurt, though she would have denied it under oath. Lily asked 14 questions, including whether Ohio had beaches, whether dead husbands could hear prayers, and whether Hannah had ever seen a whale. Caleb stopped the second question with a quiet, Lily, but Hannah answered anyway. I do not know exactly what the dead hear, she said, but I think love reaches farther than sound. June looked up from her bowl. Evelyn looked down at hers. Caleb did not move at all. The words settled and became part of the room. After supper, Hannah helped with the dishes. Evelyn tried to stand, and Hannah said, Your hands have done enough tonight. Evelyn paused. You do not know what my hands have done. No, Hannah said, rinsing a bowl. But I know what pain looks like when someone pretends it is discipline. The kitchen went quiet except for rain and water. Caleb stood near the stove, listening. Evelyn sat back down. You observe too much. It is a habit poor women develop when mistakes cost money. That answer earned a small nod. Not approval exactly, recognition. When the girls were sent back to bed, Lily hugged, Ranger waved to Hannah, and whispered loudly to June that maybe Mrs. Whitaker could make turtle pancakes by accident in the morning. June did not wave. At the doorway she turned and held up the small badge in her hand. It was silver-toned, worn at the edges, with initials Hannah could not read from across the room. Ranger rose, walked to Hannah, and then back to June, as if drawing a line between them. June's lips parted, but no words came. She disappeared into the hall. Later, Caleb showed Hannah the small guest room. It had a narrow bed, a washstand, a braided rug, and one window facing the dark lighthouse. A key sat on the dresser. Lock works from inside, he said. My room is upstairs at the far end. Mother's is across from the girls'. Ranger will sleep in the hall unless June bribes him, which she will. You do not have to give me the map of the house. Yes, I do. He said it simply. A person sleeps better knowing where everyone is. Hannah looked at him, then really looked, and saw the tiredness beneath the steadiness. Not ordinary tiredness, something older, disciplined into shape. Thank you, she said. Caleb nodded and started away. At the doorway, he stopped. If you hear me outside later, don't worry. Do you walk in storms? Sometimes. With a dog who chairs committees, especially then. He left before she could answer. Hannah closed the door, but did not lock it right away. She sat on the edge of the bed, opened her suitcase, and removed the letters from Thomas Reed. 4 careful promises. 4 bridges made of ink. She fed 3 of them into the small iron stove in the corner, one by one, watching the paper curl and blacken without pleasure. The last envelope she kept, because on the back Thomas had written the address of the little Baptist church where he said he sometimes attended services when the inn was not too full. Hannah did not know why she saved it, perhaps because a church address belonged to God more than to Thomas Reed. Perhaps because she had thrown away enough tonight. Outside, thunder rolled low over the bay. Through the window she saw the dark lighthouse standing in the yard, its glass room unlit. A few minutes later she heard the back door open, then Caleb's boots on the porch, then Ranger's nails clicking after him. The voices came muted through the wall and rain, but the night carried certain words clearly. "Aaron would say I lost my mind," Caleb said softly. Ranger made a low sound. "I know. I brought another stranger into the perimeter." Hannah held very still. Perimeter was not a word a man used for a home unless some part of him was still guarding a place that no longer existed. Caleb spoke again, too low for her to catch, and then there was only the rain, the dog's quiet huff, and the old lighthouse waiting in the dark like a lamp someone had repaired but not forgiven himself enough to light. Morning arrived without sunrise, only a thinner gray pressed against the windows and a softer grade of rain ticking along the eaves. Mercer Point woke in layers. First the stove, settling with a dry click, then Ranger's nails in the hallway, then the low groan of old plumbing, then a child's sneeze from somewhere upstairs, followed by a second child's whisper of accusation, as if sneezing had violated an agreement. Hannah had slept in pieces. She rarely slept whole in a new place, and this house had too many sounds with histories attached to them, the wind finding weak spots in the siding, the harbor bell far off through rain, Caleb's boots crossing the porch near midnight, Ranger sighing outside her door sometime after that, the girls murmuring in dreams. At 4:30 she gave up pretending. She dressed in the dark, braided her hair loosely, folded the blanket at the foot of the bed because leaving a room better than she found it had become a form of prayer, and stepped into the hallway. Ranger lay with his back against her door, eyes open. "You are a very large draft stopper," she whispered. His tail thumped once. "Do not tell anyone I said so." He rose and led her to the kitchen as if she were the one who needed escorting. The kitchen was cold at the edges, warm near the stove, and cluttered with the honest evidence of a house carrying too much. A basket of laundry not yet folded, a stack of unopened mail beside the sugar jar, 2 lunch pails waiting, empty, a cracked mug holding pencils, a child's drawing pinned to the pantry door with a clothespin. Hannah washed her hands, found coffee, built the fire up from the coals, and began learning the room by touch and consequence. Flour in the blue tin, salt in the crock with the chipped lid, baking powder behind the molasses, cast iron skillet above the stove, butter wrapped in paper in the cool pantry. She moved quietly, not because she wanted to sneak, but because households told the truth before people woke. Evelyn appeared just as Hannah was cutting cold butter into flour with 2 knives. The older woman wore a robe over her nightdress, her silver braid over one shoulder, her hands curled slightly against the ache of the weather. "You are up early." The bed and I reached a temporary disagreement. Evelyn looked at the bowl. "Biscuits? Unless the flour objects." "Flour here objects to everyone at first." "Then we will negotiate." Evelyn stood in the doorway, watching, not offering help, not retreating. Hannah recognized the test and did not resent it. If a stranger had been brought into her house on a storm night and set near children, she would have watched with both eyes and perhaps a kitchen knife within reach. After a while, Evelyn said, "You hold the knives backward." "My mother was left-handed. She taught me from the wrong side of the table." "My husband was left-handed." The words came like a shell picked up from sand, ordinary, until one noticed how long it had been held. "He used to turn every drawer into a puzzle. Did he know that he made drawers impossible? He took pride in it."
Hannah cut the butter smaller. That sounds like love, with poor organization. Evelyn looked toward the window, and for one quick second the sternness left her face. It was. She crossed the room, poured coffee with careful hands, and set a cup near Hannah's elbow. Hannah did not thank her because she sensed thanks might make the offering feel too large. She picked up the cup, drank, and kept working. The coffee was strong enough to make a lesser woman confess. Caleb said it tastes like punishment. Caleb drinks it black, and then complains like a hobby, Evelyn said. Do you complain? Only to the Lord, and only when he already knows. That earned a sound that was almost a laugh. The biscuits went into the oven as footsteps began upstairs.
Lily arrived first, hair wild, pajama sleeves twisted, carrying a stuffed rabbit by one ear. She stopped in the doorway and inhaled with theatrical seriousness. She made breakfast. I said I could. Adults say many things. Lily, Evelyn warned. I am measuring reliability. June came behind her, quieter, already dressed except for one sock, the small silver badge pinned crookedly to her sweater. Her eyes went first to Ranger, who was sitting near Hannah's skirt, then to the oven, then to Hannah's hands. You did not leave, she said. Lily turned. The buses are not running. We covered that. June ignored her sister. Hannah took the question as it was meant. No, I did not leave. June nodded once and sat at the table. That was all. For June, Hannah suspected all could be plenty. Caleb came in 20 minutes later through the back door with rain on his coat and a toolbox in one hand. He stopped at the sight of his mother drinking coffee, the girls at the table, Ranger beside Hannah, and Hannah turning bacon in the skillet as if she had always known where the stove leaned hottest. Something moved across his face there, and gone. Not happiness, that was too simple. Relief, perhaps, embarrassed to be seen. Morning, he said. Coffee is fresh, Hannah told him. Evelyn's eyes flicked toward her, catching the easy placement of the sentence. Caleb removed his coat and hung it on a peg. Storm shifted east, still bad. We have a call from a shrimp boat that broke a line near the north dock. I need to check the rescue shed, then go down to the marina. Lily sat up. Can we come? No. We could supervise? No. Ranger supervises. Ranger has seniority. Lily sighed at the injustice of the world. June buttered a biscuit with intense concentration. Caleb poured coffee and glanced at Hannah. If you need anything, Tom Bell is in the repair shed until noon. He's worked with us for years. Owen Pike may call. Do not feel obliged to answer unless Mother wants to. I can answer a telephone. I know. The words were too quick, and he seemed to hear it. I meant he can be unpleasant. Most unpleasant men are less original than they believe. Evelyn coughed into her cup. Caleb looked down, and again that hidden smile threatened his discipline. Breakfast carried the strange energy of a household that had not expected to be fed properly and was trying not to act grateful in an undignified fashion. Lily described the school project she was not doing because the county school had closed for weather. June said very little, but when Hannah placed a small jar of jam beside her, she whispered, "Thank you," without looking up. After Caleb left for the marina and Evelyn settled in the parlor with a heating pad around her hands, Hannah began the work of making herself useful without making a show of usefulness. She washed dishes, found the laundry sorted, towels from little socks, wiped the counter, set broth to simmer, and reorganized the pantry just enough that the next person could find sugar without beginning an expedition. Lily followed her from task to task, asking whether Ohio had hurricanes, whether Hannah believed dogs understood prayer, whether Uncle Caleb had always been bossy, and whether it was rude to call Owen Pike nosy if he actually was. It is usually rude to tell the truth for the pleasure of throwing it, Hannah said, folding a towel, but not rude to know it. Lily's eyes widened. That is a useful rule. June stayed near the kitchen table with paper and pencils, drawing the lighthouse from memory. She did not speak,
but Ranger lay beside her chair and occasionally opened one eye when Hannah crossed the room. The badge on June's sweater kept slipping because the clasp had bent. Hannah noticed the child pressing it flat with her palm every few minutes. She said nothing at first. People like clasps sometimes held better when not forced.
Around mid-morning, a gust hit the side of the house hard enough to rattle the window over the sink. Lily flinched and covered it by talking faster. June's pencil snapped. The badge came loose, fell and skittered beneath the table. June dropped after it too quickly and bumped her hand against the chair leg. No terrible injury, only a sharp little pain, but the sound she made emptied the room of all its ordinary noises. Hannah was beside her in an instant without seeming to rush. "Let me see." June clutched the badge in one hand and hid the other. Lily hovered. "She hates people looking when she cries." "I am not looking for crying," Hannah said calmly. "I am looking for damage." June's mouth trembled with the effort not to cry. Slowly she offered her hand. The skin near one knuckle was scraped no more than that, but the fright behind it was larger than the mark. Hannah washed it with warm water, dried it, and wrapped a thin strip of clean cloth around the finger because children sometimes needed a bandage for the feeling, not the wound. June watched every movement. "The badge broke," she said. "The clasp bent," Hannah corrected. "Bent is not broken." "Can you fix it?" "I can try." June's fingers tightened. "It was Mom's." The kitchen seemed to lean toward that sentence. Evelyn in the parlor doorway now went still. Lily stopped breathing loudly. Ranger lifted his head. Hannah held the badge in both hands as if it were a bird. "Then we will be careful." She found a pair of small pliers in the drawer near the back door, a pin from her sewing kit, and one of her own hairpins. She did not perform competence. She simply worked slowly at the table, explaining each motion before making it, letting June see that nothing was being taken from her. "This clasp wants to lie flat. We will persuade it, not bully it. Metal remembers roughness." June leaned closer. "People do too," she said. Hannah's hand paused for only half a second. "Yes," she said, "they do." Lily went silent, which made the room feel even more serious. When the clasp was set straight enough to hold, Hannah pinned the badge to a folded cloth first, then tugged lightly. It held. "Your turn," she said. June looked alarmed. "Me? You should know how it works. Things feel less frightening when they have a method." June took the badge, fingers small and careful, and practiced opening and closing the clasp 3 times. On the 4th, she pinned it to her sweater. Crooked again, but secure. Ranger stood, sniffed the badge, and sneezed. Lily declared that a blessing. June looked at Hannah. "Ranger trusted you first." It was not exactly thanks. It was closer to testimony. Hannah felt something in her chest answer, but she kept her voice light. "Ranger may have questionable standards. He slept against my door and snored like a tired uncle." Lily gasped. "He snores for family." Evelyn turned away, but not before Hannah saw her eyes shine. The rest of the morning moved with a gentler rhythm. June remained at the table, but no longer turned her drawing over when Hannah passed. Lily helped carry folded towels and dropped only one. Evelyn allowed Hannah to bring her tea without making a speech about independence, which felt like progress negotiated under ceasefire terms. Near noon, the back door opened, and Caleb came in with Tom Bell, a lean, older man in a rain jacket, both of them smelling of the marina and cold metal. Caleb's hair was damp, and his jaw carried the tightness of someone who had spent hours holding weather and worry in the same hand. "Boat is secure," he said to Evelyn. "No one hurt. We'll need to replace line at the north dock after the storm." Safe words, Hannah thought. He led with them for the girls. Lily launched into the story of the badge before he had removed his coat. "Hannah fixed Mom's pin, and June did the clasp herself." And Ranger blessed it with a sneeze. Caleb went absolutely still. It lasted no more than a breath, but Hannah saw it. So did Evelyn. June stood from the table, shoulders square, badge crooked and shining. It bent. She fixed it. I helped. Caleb looked at the badge, then at June, then at Hannah. The room waited. Not for anger, perhaps, but for grief to choose its shape. His voice, when it came, was quiet. That was your mother's favorite. I know. June's chin lifted, brave and small. I did not want it in the drawer anymore. Caleb's throat moved. No, I guess you didn't. Ranger came to stand beside him, pressing his shoulder against Caleb's leg. Tom Bell suddenly found the rain gauge outside very interesting and excused himself to the shed. Hannah wished she could do the same. Instead, she stayed by the sink, hands folded in a dish towel, accepting that sometimes the kindest thing was to remain visible and still. Caleb looked at her. Thank you, he said, but the words were not enough for what they carried. Bent is not broken, Hannah answered. June touched the badge. Lily whispered, That is a useful rule too. Evelyn sat down slowly, and for once, no one commented on her hands. The wind worried the windows. The old lighthouse stood dark in the gray yard, and in the kitchen, where nothing dramatic had happened and everything important had, Caleb Mercer looked at the woman the town had dismissed and understood with quiet alarm that she had crossed one of the invisible lines in his house without forcing it, without asking to be praised for it, and without knowing that no one outside family had touched that badge since the day his sister was buried. By late afternoon, the storm had settled into a colder rhythm, less wild than the night before, but more stubborn, as if the sky had stopped shouting and started arguing. Rain slid down the kitchen windows in narrow streams. Beyond them, the yard lay beaten flat, the rescue shed door braced with a plank, the lighthouse dark against a low ceiling of clouds. Hannah learned that Mercer Point had its own weather language. A hard gust made Evelyn glance toward the chimney. A pause in the rain made Lily ask whether the world was holding its breath. A certain distant clang from the marina made Caleb look up, even if no one else heard it. Ranger heard everything first. His ears told the room what mattered before any human face did. After the badge, the house moved carefully around itself. June wore it pinned to her sweater and touched it often, not with panic now, but with the checking habit of someone learning that precious things could be used without being lost. Caleb did not mention it again, and that restraint told Hannah more about him than a speech would have. Some men thought tenderness meant asking children to explain feelings until the feelings hid. Caleb simply noticed, absorbed, and gave June room to breathe. Hannah was kneading dough near the counter when Evelyn came to stand beside her. The older woman watched the motion of Hannah's hands. You worked in sick rooms? Some. Family? My husband near the end. Before him, my younger brother when we were children. After my husband died, whoever needed help and could pay a little. Evelyn's gaze went to the window where Ranger stood watching Caleb cross the yard to the shed. Nursing without title, then. Work often comes without the name it deserves. Evelyn made a sound of agreement. My hands started acting up 2 winters ago. I keep telling Caleb it is weather. He keeps telling me weather does not explain dropping cups in July. He worries. He commands. Worry is what he calls it when I catch him. Hannah pressed the heel of her hand into the dough. He learned command somewhere. It kept people alive. Evelyn looked at her sharply. That is a generous reading for a man you met last night. It is not generosity. It is observation. The older woman accepted that with a small tilt of her head. Observation can become dangerous when mixed with compassion. So can loneliness. For a moment they listened to rain. Then Evelyn said, Mara Jennings called again while you were upstairs putting towels away. Hannah waited. She teaches the girls' Sunday school class. Good woman. Widow. She said Owen Pike has already made 3 calls and 1 visit since morning. According to him, Caleb has taken in Thomas Reed's discarded bride.
Hannah's hand stopped. The phrase struck hard because it was meant to. Discarded bride. It turned her into an object mishandled by one man and stored by another. Evelyn saw the color change in her face. Mara told him if he needed a hobby,
The church gutters were full of leaves. Hannah resumed kneading.
I may like Mara. Most sensible people do. Owen is not sensible. He is a weather vane with a tongue. Does Caleb know? Caleb knows Owen breathes, so he assumes trouble. Evelyn leaned against the counter, careful with her wrists. This town likes a tidy story. A widow traveling for work is understandable if she is poor enough, grateful enough, and leaves quickly. A woman staying under the roof of a retired SEAL who lives alone with children and a mother who no longer attends every church supper will bother them. I'm not under his roof alone. Truth matters less to gossip than shape. Hannah looked toward the hall where Lily and June were building a blanket fort, with more engineering confidence than structural success. Ranger lay beside them, allowing a quilt to rest over his back like a royal burden. Then we will keep the shape clear. Evelyn studied her. You make that sound easy. No.
I make it sound necessary. The dough went into a bowl beneath a cloth. Hannah wiped flour from her hands and began sorting the supper ingredients. She had decided long ago that when people tried to make her small work could keep her from shrinking. Not frantic work, not martyr work, just the next useful thing. Chop onions, check broth, fold towels, put the knife back where it belongs. Somewhere in those ordinary motions a person could remain herself. Around 4, Ranger rose from the blanket fort so quickly that the quilt slid off him and Lily protested on behalf of architecture. He went to the front door and stood rigid, ears forward. Caleb, who had come in moments before and was reviewing supply notes at the kitchen table, looked up. Truck. Hannah heard nothing. Then a few seconds later, tires hissed on the wet lane. Evelyn's mouth tightened. That will be Owen. Do you want me out of sight? Hannah asked. Caleb looked at her and something in his expression sharpened. No. The answer was immediate. Then he seemed to soften the edge of it. You do not have to face him either. Those are different offers. Yes. I will stay where I am. Caleb nodded. He did not praise her for courage, which she appreciated. Courage was sometimes only the lack of a better exit. Owen Pike arrived, wearing a raincoat shiny with water and a face arranged into public concern. He knocked, though the window beside the door gave him a full view of everyone inside. Ranger did not bark. That was somehow more unnerving. Caleb opened the door halfway. Owen. Caleb, Storm treating you all right? We are busy. Owen peered past him. Mrs. Whitaker here, you can see that she is. Hannah stepped into the kitchen doorway before Caleb could become a wall, not because she disliked walls. On some nights, walls were blessings. But she had been shoved behind too many decisions made by men who called it protection. Mr. Pike, she said. Owen removed his hat, revealing damp hair combed with great optimism across the top of his head. Mrs. Whitaker, Thomas asked me to come by. Caleb remained still. Evelyn stood near the stove, and Hannah felt the older woman's attention like a hand at her back. Lily and June were silent in the hall. Ranger sat at the threshold between Owen and the rest of the house. Did he? Hannah said. Owen cleared his throat. He feels badly about the confusion. It was not confusing. It was inconsiderate. Owen blinked. Well, he and Caroline have a room open now at the inn. Small one, but warm. Given the circumstances, he says you can stay there until the bus runs. No charge. How kind of him to offer shelter after I found it elsewhere. People are talking, Owen said, lowering his voice, although every person in the house could hear him. A woman in your position staying here with Caleb, being a single man and all. It might look cleaner if you moved to the inn. Hannah folded her hands at her waist to keep from straightening the towels on the counter. Cleaner for whom?
Now don't take offense. That usually means offense has already entered the room. Caleb's mouth tightened, but he stayed quiet. Owen glanced at him, perhaps expecting rescue from Hannah's directness, and finding none. I'm saying folks may misunderstand. Then folks may ask responsible questions and receive truthful answers. I am helping Mrs. Mercer while the storm has the road slowed and while her hands are giving her trouble. Mr. Mercer has 2 young nieces in the house. I have a room with a lock. I am here by practical arrangement, not secrecy. Owen's eyes moved toward Evelyn's wrapped wrists and then away. Still, Thomas thinks it would be best. Thomas Reed has already demonstrated poor judgment about what is best for me. Lily made a tiny sound from the hallway, quickly smothered. June stood beside her, one hand on the badge. Owen's cheeks colored. Mrs.
Whitaker, I am only trying to spare your reputation. Hannah stepped 1 pace closer, not enough to threaten, enough to stand in the truth with both feet. My reputation survived widowhood, unpaid debts that were not mine, rented rooms with thin walls and a 3-day bus ride to meet a man who forgot to mention he had married someone else. It will survive honest work in a storm. Evelyn's eyes flashed approval so fast Hannah might have missed it if she had not been learning the woman all day. Caleb looked at Owen. You heard her. Caleb, I'm telling you as a friend, no. Caleb said quietly. You are telling me as a man who likes being first to a story. There is no story here for you. Ranger gave 1 low huff. Owen looked down at the dog and decided wisely not to argue with that part. I'll pass along the answer. Please do, Hannah said, accurately if the habit is available. Owen put his hat back on with less dignity than he had removed it and retreated into the rain. Caleb closed the door. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Lily whispered, accurately if the habit is available, with delighted reverence, as if Hannah had invented a new form of weapon. Evelyn said, Lily, I'm appreciating language. Caleb looked at Hannah. You did not need me. No, she took a breath. But I noticed that you stayed. His face changed in that careful way of his, emotion approaching a guarded gait. It seemed the right place to stand. Nothing about the sentence should have warmed her. It was plain as a nail. It warmed her anyway. The house returned to motion, though the air had shifted. Lily followed Hannah into the kitchen and announced that Owen had the face of a wet cabbage, which earned a warning from Evelyn and a badly hidden cough from Caleb. June remained quiet, but when Hannah passed her, the child reached out and touched 2 fingers to Hannah's sleeve. A brief contact. Gone almost immediately. Hannah felt it long after. Supper was nearly ready when Ranger appeared, carrying one of June's small socks in his mouth. He placed it at Hannah's feet, sat, and stared. Why has the chairman delivered laundry? Hannah asked. Lily looked up from setting spoons. He does that when he thinks someone has a job. June came into the kitchen and saw the sock. That was in my drawer. Ranger has promoted me to sock management. June's mouth twitched, a near smile. Caleb watched from the table where he was pretending to inspect a marine radio. He usually brings me things when he wants me to stop working. And does it work? More than I admit. Then he is wise, annoyingly. Supper was chicken stew biscuits and canned peaches Evelyn claimed were too sweet while eating all of hers. The rain eased for perhaps 10 minutes, and in that lull the distant harbor bell rang clear. Caleb went still at the sound, not frightened exactly, but called away. Ranger's head lifted. Hannah noticed. Evelyn noticed Hannah noticing. The bell rang again. Caleb stood. I need to check the shed before the wind shifts. You checked it an hour ago, Evelyn said. I'll be quick. He took his coat and left before anyone could object. Ranger followed him to the door but stopped there, torn between duty and some command Hannah had not heard. Caleb looked down. Stay. Ranger did not like it. He stayed. Through the window, Hannah watched Caleb cross the yard toward the dark lighthouse instead of the shed. He stood at its base in the gray rain, one hand on the door, not entering. A man at the edge of his own locked room. "He goes there when the bell sounds like something else," Evelyn said softly from behind her. Hannah kept her gaze on the window. "Something from the Navy? Something from losing men. He will tell you or he will not. It is not mine to spend." Hannah nodded. That answer she respected. After the girls went upstairs and Evelyn retired early, Hannah washed the supper dishes and tried not to think about Caleb standing outside in the rain. Ranger lay by the back door, eyes open. Finally, Caleb returned, damp and quiet. He removed his coat, hung it carefully, and looked at the stove as if surprised to find the kitchen still there. "Tea?" Hannah asked. He seemed about to refuse, then nodded. She poured without conversation. For several minutes they stood on opposite sides of the kitchen, the way people do when silence is safer than the wrong question. Then he said, "The lighthouse doesn't work yet." "You said almost. Almost can last years if a man is stubborn enough." Hannah wrapped both hands around her cup. "Or afraid enough." His eyes met hers. No anger, only recognition and the discomfort of being seen accurately by someone who had no right yet to know the map. Ranger Rose came between them and leaned against Caleb's leg. Caleb touched the dog's head. "Ranger thinks this conversation is above my clearance." The chairman may be right. That almost smile returned, tired this time. Upstairs a cough sounded, small, sharp, then another. Caleb's face changed instantly. Ranger's ears snapped forward. Hannah set down her cup. A child's cough could be nothing. In weather like this, in a house full of damp coats and old drafts, it could also become something by morning. June appeared at the top of the stairs in her nightgown, badge still pinned crookedly over her heart. Her face was pale. "Lily says she is not sick," she called down. Behind her came another cough, wetter than the first, and the whole house seemed to draw one cold breath. The cough came again before anyone moved, a small sound from upstairs that carried more authority than thunder. Caleb was on the stairs first, not running exactly, but climbing with the terrible speed of a man who had already imagined the worst and was trying not to show the shape of it. Hannah followed with Ranger at her knee, and Evelyn behind them, one hand on the banister, her jaw set against pain. June stood in the hallway outside the girls' room, barefoot and straight-backed, badge glinting crookedly in the dim light. "He says she is fine," June said, which, in a house with children, meant very little and everything. Lily lay propped against two pillows, cheeks flushed, hair stuck to her forehead, trying to look offended by the attention. "I am not sick. I coughed dramatically." Another cough interrupted the defense and left her blinking with surprise, as if her own body had betrayed her in public. Caleb sat beside her and touched the back of his fingers to her forehead. The change in him was immediate and quiet. His shoulders lowered, his face stilled, and the careful human warmth he had shown all evening retreated behind something trained and hard. He was assessing, counting, preparing. Hannah recognized the look because she had seen it on doctors who arrived too late and widows who knew before anyone told them. It frightened her more than panic would have. "Fever," he said. Evelyn reached Lily and touched her other cheek. "Not terrible yet." Yet was the word that tightened the hallway. Caleb stood. "I'll call Dr. Rowell." "Phone line was crackling earlier," Evelyn said. "Try anyway." He was already moving. Lily tried to sit up. "I told you I am not sick. Sick people get soup and whispered conversations." "You like soup," June said. "I like choosing soup." Hannah came to the bedside and smiled softly, not too brightly. Children could smell false cheer the way dogs smelled fear. "Then we will call this an unscheduled rest with broth nearby for illegal reasons." Lily considered that through fever-bright eyes. "Can there be ginger biscuits for legal reasons?" That depends on the judge.
Who is the judge? Hannah looked at June. June looked startled, then serious. Ranger. Ranger, hearing his name, placed his chin on the edge of the mattress and stared at Lily with grave authority. He will allow biscuits when appropriate, Hannah said. Lily sighed. He is strict, but handsome. Evelyn made a sound that might have been a laugh if worry had not been sitting on top of it. Caleb returned from the hallway with the telephone receiver still in his hand. Line is bad, but I got the operator. Dr. Rowell is at the clinic. He'll call back if the connection holds. Road near the inlet is flooded. You are not driving it blind, Hannah said. The words came before she had permission to say them. Caleb looked at her. If she gets worse,
we make the next safe decision. Not the fastest frightened one. His eyes sharpened, and she knew she had stepped near something dangerous in him. Not violence, but fear wearing command's old uniform. I know these roads. In daylight. In a storm that is changing the ditches every hour, with a child here who needs you alive more than she needs you heroic. The room went still. Lily's eyes widened with interest despite the fever. June looked at her uncle. Evelyn watched Hannah as if reassessing the size of her courage. Ranger leaned harder against Caleb's leg. That, more than Hannah's argument, seemed to reach him. Caleb set the receiver down. We wait for the call. We help her rest while we wait, Hannah said. She did not tell him what to do after that. She gave him something to hold. Could you bring a basin of warm water, clean cloths, and the thermometer if you have one? He hesitated for half a breath, then nodded. Work steadied him. Not busy work, not commands thrown to flatter a worried man, but necessary pieces of care. Hannah had learned that beside her husband's sickbed when neighbors arrived full of pity and empty hands. Give fear a task, and sometimes it remembers how to breathe. Evelyn opened the window a finger's width for air and adjusted the lamp. Hannah helped Lily change into a dry nightgown and tucked the blanket in loosely, not smothering her. She asked questions in a calm voice. Was her throat sore? Did her chest feel tight? Could she sip water? Did anything hurt in a way that surprised her? Nothing in the answers sounded like immediate danger, and Hannah let that truth settle in the room without dressing it up as certainty. You have done this before, Evelyn murmured. Enough to know when I am useful and when I am not a doctor. The phone rang downstairs, shrill through the house. Caleb took the stairs 2 at a time. Ranger looked torn, then stayed beside Lily the first quiet vote of the night. While Caleb spoke with Dr. Rowell through a crackling line, Hannah kept the girls occupied with small, ordinary rituals. Lily chose which blanket stayed on top. June counted breaths with Hannah's watch for exactly 1 minute. Evelyn measured medicine according to the doctor's instructions when Caleb relayed them from the hall. No one performed bravery. They simply did the next careful thing. That was how the evening narrowed. Warm cloths, sips of water, the clock hand moving, the rain easing and then returning. Caleb standing in the doorway every few minutes as if the room might disappear if he looked away. Around 9, Lily's fever had not climbed, and her breathing sounded easier. Dr. Rowell called again, gave more instructions, and told Caleb that the clinic would send someone at first light if needed, and the roads allowed. It was not a miracle. It was enough. Enough was sometimes the kindest word God used. June sat on the floor beside Ranger, her back against the bed, badge in her lap now because she had finally taken it off before sleeping and then refused to leave it across the room. When Mom was sick, she said suddenly, people whispered. Caleb's face closed. Evelyn's hand tightened around the cloth she was folding. Lily, half asleep, did not hear. Hannah did. She lowered herself to the floor across from June. Whispering can make a room feel more frightening. June nodded. They thought we could not tell. Children can tell almost everything. They just do not always have words yet. June looked at Ranger's pause. Is Lily going to leave? The question was so plain and so impossible that Caleb took one step forward and stopped as if the floor had told him no. Hannah did not rush to cover it. "Not from what I see tonight," she said gently. "She is sick. She is being watched. The doctor knows. Your uncle is here. Your grandmother is here. Ranger is here. I am here. If anything changes, the grown-ups will say the truth in words you can understand." June's eyes filled, but did not spill. "Promise?" Hannah felt the old fear of promises. They were easy to make and expensive to break. She offered only what she could keep. "I promise not to hide the truth from you just because you are small." June absorbed that. Ranger put his head in her lap. Caleb turned away toward the window, but not before Hannah saw what the answer had done to him. Later, Evelyn insisted on sitting with Lily for the first watch. Caleb objected. Evelyn ended the objection by saying, "I was a Navy nurse before you knew how to tie your shoes, and I raised you through chickenpox, a broken collarbone, and the summer you tried to build a submarine from rain barrels. Sit down." Caleb sat. Hannah made coffee, then watered it down because no one in the house needed Evelyn's usual punishment strength at 10 at night. Lily slept. June dozed on the small couch in the corner, her fingers still resting in Ranger's fur. At midnight, Evelyn's hands had swollen enough that she could no longer pretend. Hannah took the chair beside Lily. 2 hours, she said to Caleb before he could protest. "You sleep. If her fever rises, if her breathing changes, if she wakes confused, if anything feels wrong, I come get you. I will not be proud with someone else's child." He stared at her for a long moment. "Niece." "What?" "She is my niece." The correction was automatic and sadder than he knew. Hannah held his gaze. "She is your Lily." The room changed around those 4 words. Evelyn looked down. Caleb's face did not break, but something in it loosened in pain. 2 hours, he said hoarsely. He went because Lily needed rested hands in the morning, and because Ranger rose and herded him gently toward the door with the full authority of a creature who had been done with human foolishness for years. Hannah sat beside Lily through the dim hours. The storm softened against the roof. June woke once, saw Hannah there, and whispered, "You stayed." "I said I would. People say that." "Yes," Hannah replied. "Then they get a chance to mean it." June closed her eyes again. Near 2, Caleb returned, hair damp from washing his face, eyes clearer. He checked Lily with the careful, reverent movements of someone touching a fragile instrument. "Better," he whispered. "A little," Hannah said. "A little counts." He looked at her then, tired beyond concealment. "When my sister died, I was in the room and still somehow late. I keep thinking if I had seen the right thing sooner." He stopped. Hannah did not ask him to finish a sentence that had already cost enough. "Grief likes to dress as evidence," she said. "It argues like a lawyer. That does not mean it tells the truth." Caleb's hand rested on Lily's blanket. Ranger leaned against his knee. The old lighthouse beyond the window stood black in the rain. "You talk like someone who has had to answer it back," he said. "Every morning for 2 years. Lily stirred then and opened her eyes. "Uncle Caleb?" "I'm here, little light." Hannah saw the nickname strike June, too, saw the child wake just enough to hear it and relax. Lily's voice was small. "Is Hannah the lady God sent until the storm stops?" Caleb looked at Hannah because he did not know how to answer without asking too much of her. Hannah smiled at the child, soft and honest. "I think God sends people for the next right thing," she said. "Tonight, that is enough." Lily seemed satisfied. Caleb did not, but he accepted it because children were allowed answers adults could only borrow. By dawn, the fever had eased. The rain had slackened to mist. The house smelled of coffee, damp wool, and ginger biscuits Hannah had baked at 3:30 because her hands needed hope to do. When Lily woke, asking if legal biscuits had been approved, Ranger placed one paw on the edge of the bed and huffed.
June translated solemnly. The judge says yes.
Caleb laughed under his breath, then stopped when the telephone rang downstairs, early enough to make every adult look toward the hall. Evelyn answered it, spoke only twice, and returned with the expression of a woman carrying news she did not yet like. Road crews may clear the causeway by Monday, she said. The bus company is taking names. Lily smiled because buses meant the world was healing. June did not smile at all. Ranger turned his head toward Hannah, and Caleb, still kneeling by Lily's bed, looked at her as if the storm had just opened a door none of them were ready to walk through. The morning after Lily's fever broke, Mercer Point did not celebrate loudly. It did not have that kind of house. Relief there moved in practical shapes, Evelyn letting her teacup sit untouched for a full minute because her hands had stopped guarding against bad news. Caleb standing in the hallway with his forehead briefly against the doorframe where no child could see, June eating half a biscuit without being urged, Ranger sleeping at last with his legs stretched out and one ear still assigned to duty. Hannah noticed all of it while frying eggs in the skillet and warming broth for Lily, who had declared from her bed that she was recovering heroically and should be consulted on all breakfast decisions. Outside, the storm had lost some of its temper. Gray clouds still dragged low over the bay and water pooled in the yard, but the rain no longer battered the windows. It whispered instead. The old lighthouse stood with beads of water on its glass, dark as ever, but in the softer morning Hannah could see its paint was not as ruined as she had thought. Someone had scraped and patched it. Someone had spent hours returning it to usefulness and stopped just short of light. That thought stayed with her while the house came awake. Caleb returned from checking the rescue shed, carrying a coil of rope and wearing the same guarded face he had worn since Lily coughed the night before. He looked at the food, the girls, his mother Ranger, the window, the exits, and finally Hannah. Dr. Rowell says if she keeps improving, no clinic visit unless the fever comes back. Good, Evelyn said. Sit before your coffee gets ideas. Caleb sat. Lily, wrapped in a blanket at the far end of the table, by special permission, watched him over her spoon. You slept in your boots. I took them off. Not both. June looked under the table. One boot. Caleb glanced down as if surprised to find his right boot still on. Lily brightened. I knew it! Evelyn sighed. This family has survived storms, war debt, grief, and your uncle's cooking, but apparently a left boot defeated him. Hannah turned away to hide a smile. Caleb removed the boot with as much dignity as the situation allowed, which was little. The laughter that followed was small and careful, but it belonged in the room. It loosened something. After breakfast, Lily was ordered back to bed and June volunteered to sit with her, as long as Lily did not perform illness for attention. A phrase that made Lily gasp in injured innocence. Ranger followed them upstairs, carrying a biscuit in his mouth, until Hannah said, Judge, that is evidence tampering. He stopped, looked at her, and then calmly ate it. Caleb actually laughed then. Not much. Enough. The sound surprised him first, then Hannah, then Evelyn. It faded quickly, but not before the house took note. Mid-morning brought Mara Jennings through the back door with a covered dish, 2 library books, and a rain hat that had surrendered any claim to fashion. She was a woman in her early 40s, with warm brown skin, kind eyes, and a way of entering a kitchen that made it feel she had been invited by the walls. I come bearing vegetable soup and information, she announced. Evelyn looked up from the table where Hannah had spread the household bills. If the information is from Owen, the soup had better be strong. The soup is innocent. Owen is not. Mara set the dish down and turned to Hannah. You must be Mrs. Whitaker. Hannah, if you like. Mara Jennings, Sunday school teacher, emergency casserole distributor, and occasional nuisance to men who mistake their opinions for public service. Then I am pleased to know you. Caleb appeared in the doorway with a repair manual in one hand, saw Mara, and braced himself. Mara noticed. Caleb Mercer, do not look as if I came to civilize you. I gave that up 2 years ago. Best decision you ever made. Second best. First was telling Owen Pike his mouth needed a Sabbath. Evelyn laughed outright, and Hannah understood why Mara mattered here. She carried warmth with a spine in it. While Caleb went to the shed and the girls rested upstairs, Mara helped Hannah wash jars for storing dried beans and told her without cruelty how the town was speaking. Some are sympathetic. Some are curious. A few are bored and therefore dangerous. Thomas Reed is embarrassed, and embarrassed men often try to rearrange the room so the mirror points elsewhere. Hannah dried a jar. He sent Owen to move me. I heard. I declined. I heard that too, with embellishments. In one version, Ranger growled a psalm. Hannah looked toward the hall. He may know one, Mara smiled. I wanted you to know you are not alone here. Evelyn has standing, Caleb has respect, and those girls have half the church wrapped around their fingers. But a woman new to town still needs another woman who will tell her where the ground is soft. Hannah's hands stilled over the towel. Why are you helping me? Mara did not pretend not to understand. Because when my husband died, people were kind in public and confused in private. They wanted my grief to make me either saintly or helpless. I was neither. Evelyn was the first person who came to my house, took one look at the dishes piled in the sink and said, Mara, sorrow does not exempt plates from being washed. Then she washed them with me. I have been loyal ever since. Evelyn at the table did not look up. You were using every bowl you owned. I was grieving creatively. The two women shared a glance that had history in it. Hannah felt a door open somewhere near her, not wide, not demanding. A door she could choose later. The bills on the table were not good, but not hopeless. Mercer Point survived on boat repairs, emergency towing, modest Coast Guard contracts, and seasonal work that disappeared in winter. Evelyn had kept the books for years, but pain had slowed her, and Caleb had ignored any paperwork that did not shout. Hannah saw patterns, quickly duplicate orders, unpaid invoices, supplies, bought in emergency quantities because no one had tracked what was already on the shelf. Work, she thought, real work, not charity disguised as usefulness. By early afternoon, she had made 3 lists. Caleb came in, saw the lists, and stopped. Should I be afraid? Of paper? Perhaps. It has been neglected and may be resentful. He picked up one list. You did all this today? Your invoices were not hiding well, Evelyn said. I told you the fuel receipts were breeding. Caleb scanned the page. This is good. The praise was plain, almost startled. Hannah found she valued it more than she intended. It is a start. Could you teach me? The question surprised everyone, perhaps Caleb most of all. Hannah looked at him. The accounts, the system. If you are leaving when the bus runs, I should know how not to ruin what you fix. Leaving. The word performed its duty. It reminded the room of the arrangement. Lily was better. The storm was breaking. Buses eventually would run. Hannah folded a towel slowly. Yes, she said. I can teach you. Caleb nodded, but he did not look satisfied. That evening the clouds lifted enough for a strip of pale gold to appear low over the bay. The girls were allowed downstairs for supper wrapped in blankets and triumph. Mara stayed, which gave the table an ease it had not had before. Lily told her that Hannah had been sent by God for the next right thing, and June added, but maybe the next right thing can be more than one night. No one answered quickly. Ranger placed his head on Caleb's knee. Caleb looked down at him. A2, Chairman? Lily frowned. Is that Navy? Worse, Evelyn said. Education. After supper, Mara washed dishes with Hannah, while Evelyn supervised from a chair and Caleb took the girls upstairs. When he came back, Mara had gone to the parlor with Evelyn, leaving Hannah at the sink alone. Caleb stood in the doorway. Walk, he asked. Hannah looked at the wet yard. In this weather? It's only mist now. Men who say only mist are why women own extra towels. He accepted that as fair. She put on her coat anyway. They crossed the yard with Ranger ranging ahead, paws silent in the wet grass. The air smelled of brine pine and storm-torn earth. Up close, the lighthouse was smaller than it had seemed from the window, but more beautiful. White paint patched in uneven sections, a blue door swollen from damp brass fittings polished in places by recent hands. Caleb unlocked it and pushed the door open. Inside, the stairs curled tightly upward. My grandfather called it Mercy Light, he said. He said official lighthouses warned ships away from danger. This one was for people who already knew they were in it. Hannah touched the railing. Does it really work? The lens is set. Wiring is almost done. Switch sticks. Generator needs a part I have in the shed. Almost. They climbed to the glass room. From there she could see the house glowing behind them, the rescue shed, the dark line of the bay, the faint lights of town. Caleb stood with one hand on the metal frame Ranger beside him. I started fixing it when I got back from the Navy. Thought if I made something shine, maybe... He stopped. Maybe what? Maybe I would. The honesty came out rough, unplanned. Hannah did not soften it with pity. And then, he looked toward the water. Then I got near the end and decided a man who couldn't bring his own sister home safe had no business lighting anything for anyone else. The sentence was quiet. It was also wrong, and she could feel how long he had been living beneath it. Caleb. He looked at her. She chose not to argue with grief directly. Grief loved a courtroom. Your girls can see this tower from their bedroom. I know. Children notice unlit things. His hand tightened on the frame. Below them, Ranger shifted, shoulder pressing against his leg. The wind moved gently around the glass. You think I should finish it? I think you already have, except for the part where you forgive yourself enough to turn it on. That was too much. She knew it as soon as the words entered the air. Caleb stepped back, not angry, but wounded into retreat. We should go in. Hannah nodded. Yes. They descended in silence. At the door, Ranger paused and looked back up the stairs, whining softly. Caleb locked the lighthouse without looking at Hannah. The walk back felt longer. At the porch, the phone rang inside, sharp and sudden. Evelyn answered before they reached the door. Her face was pale when they entered. Thomas Reed is coming tomorrow, she said. With Owen. He told Mara he wants to make things right in person. Hannah removed her wet coat and hung it carefully. Her hands were steady. Caleb noticed that they were too steady. Do you want me to tell him not to come? Hannah looked toward the dark window where the lighthouse should have been reflected but was not. No, she said. Some men need to hear no while standing close enough to recognize it. Ranger stood between them and the door all night, as if even sleep should wait until that answer had been protected. The morning Thomas Reed was expected, Cape Charles woke under a clean gray sky, washed but not bright, with the storm clouds breaking apart over the bay like torn cotton. Water still stood in the low places, and the road to town remained half flooded near the inlet, but birds had returned to the fence rails, and the marsh grass shivered in wind instead of bowing under rain. Hannah found herself grateful for the small mercy of daylight. She had learned not to make life-shaping decisions in the dark, and although she did not intend Thomas Reed to shape anything now, his arrival belonged to the category of things that should be faced with lamps out and windows uncovered. She rose before the household as she had done each day since arriving, and made coffee biscuits and oatmeal with apples, because Lily had announced that heroic recovery required food with texture. Ranger lay near the stove, pretending not to watch the biscuits. You are not subtle, Hannah told him. He blinked once. That is not a defense. His tail moved. The kitchen felt different this morning. Not peaceful exactly, but claimed. The towels were folded. The pantry shelves had labels made from torn paper and string. The household bills were stacked in 3 piles: urgent, soon, and stop ignoring this before it bites. Lily's medicine schedule sat beneath a salt shaker. June's drawings had migrated from under chairs to the sideboard where Evelyn had placed them without comment. Even Caleb's repair notes had been gathered into a folder, though he had looked at the folder as if it were a trap. Hannah knew these changes were temporary because she had made them temporary. A guest did not rearrange a life and call it home. A helper did not let her heart put roots into someone else's floorboards. She repeated that truth while stirring oatmeal. Roots did not listen. Evelyn came in wearing a navy dress and her wrist braces, which Hannah understood as armor. You dressed for battle. I dressed for company. The difference is usually silverware. Should I put on my better dress? Only if it gives you courage, not if it gives him satisfaction. Hannah looked down at her work dress, dark blue, clean, patched neatly at one cuff. This will do. Evelyn nodded approval. Yes, it says you work and you know it. Caleb arrived next, freshly shaved except for the stubborn shadow along his jaw, wearing a gray sweater and the old watch Hannah had noticed on his wrist. He looked rested enough to worry her less, and tense enough to worry her differently. Ranger Rose circled him once and sat on his foot. Caleb looked down. You're early with the judgment. He has a full docket, Hannah said. Caleb's eyes met hers, and the awkwardness from the lighthouse flickered between them. He had retreated last night after she spoke too directly. She had not apologized because she had not been wrong, but she had wondered if truth, like medicine, required better timing. Now, he said quietly, about last night. Evelyn immediately became absorbed in finding spoons. Hannah kept stirring. Yes? You were right. That was all. Plain, costly, enough. Hannah looked at him. I was also abrupt. Abrupt, I understand. Do you? I was in the teams for 14 years. His mouth shifted. Abrupt is practically a dialect. Evelyn set spoons on the table with unnecessary force. If the two of you are finished translating stubborn into courtship, breakfast is ready. Caleb stared at his mother. Hannah nearly dropped the spoon. Evelyn sat with great dignity. I said what I said. Lily and June came in just then, saving no one and improving everything. Lily wore 2 sweaters and carried the stuffed rabbit in a blanket sling. June wore the badge straight today. Hannah noticed and said nothing, which made June touch it with quiet pride. Breakfast was ordinary in the way families need ordinary before trouble arrives. Lily argued that oatmeal counted as medicine, and therefore should be followed by a biscuit. June corrected her math homework with a purple pencil. Evelyn complained about the coffee she had made herself yesterday, and Hannah had diluted today, calling it an insult to naval endurance. Caleb answered questions about the road, the shed, and whether Thomas Reed would be allowed inside. Not unless Hannah wants him inside, he said. Everyone looked at Hannah. She poured more coffee. The porch is enough. Lily nodded solemnly. Like a raccoon. Evelyn froze. Hannah pointed a spoon at Lily. No animals in comparisons at the breakfast table. Lily considered this. Like a wet umbrella. Better. The truck came at 10. Ranger heard it first and went to the door. Caleb stood, but Hannah lifted a hand. I will answer. He did not like it. He allowed it. That distinction mattered. She opened the door to Thomas Reed and Owen Pike standing on the porch in the washed morning light. Thomas wore a dark coat too formal for the muddy yard, and he held his hat in both hands. Without rain and surprise to soften him, he looked like what he was, a man embarrassed by consequences rather than transformed by conscience. Owen stood half a step behind, trying to appear supportive and official at once. Mrs. Whitaker, Thomas said. May we speak? We are speaking. His ears colored. Owen's eyes moved past her into the house where Caleb stood visible in the kitchen, but not close enough to take the scene from her. Evelyn sat at the table, posture upright. Lily and June had been sent to the parlor, though Hannah suspected they were listening through the old vent. Ranger sat at Hannah's left side, silent. "I owe you an apology," Thomas began. "Yes." He blinked. She waited. "I handled things poorly. Caroline and I married quickly. There were family matters. I wrote, but clearly too late. I should have ensured you received word before traveling." "Yes." Thomas shifted. His prepared speech had expected forgiveness to arrive sooner. "I have arranged a room for you at the inn until the bus runs. I will cover meals as well. It is the least I can do." "The least was what you did at the station." Owen made a small choking sound. Thomas took it with a wince that seemed genuine, but not useful. "I deserve that." "Deserving is not the issue. I have shelter and work here until transportation is available." Owen stepped in. "Mrs. Whitaker, the concern is not only shelter. This arrangement puts everyone in an awkward position. No, it puts people who enjoy judging at a busy angle." Caleb looked down. Evelyn's lips pressed together. Thomas glanced behind Hannah again. "I never meant for you to be placed in a situation where your reputation could be questioned." The sentence should have sounded protective. It sounded like ownership attempting a cleaner coat. Hannah felt the old humiliation try to rise. She gave it a chair and did not let it drive. "Mr. Reed, you invited me across several states for employment and possible marriage. You changed your life and failed to tell me in time. I arrived with limited money in severe weather in a town where you knew lodging would be scarce. I found honorable work in a household with an older woman, 2 children, and a man whose integrity has so far exceeded yours in every practical way. My reputation is not endangered by being treated decently. It is endangered only when men speak as if my presence requires their management." Thomas lowered his gaze. Owen did not. "People will ask questions. Then let them ask me." "Women often suffer when tongues start wagging," Owen said. "And tongues often wag because men feed them," Mara Jennings said from behind the 2 men. She had come up the lane on foot, carrying a covered basket and wearing the same defeated rain hat. Neither Thomas nor Owen had heard her. Hannah had not either. Ranger had, but apparently approved. Mara stepped onto the porch as if she had been expected by Providence, and perhaps had. "Good morning." Owen looked pained. "Mara." "Owen." She turned to Thomas. "Mr. Reed, I am sure your apology is sincere in the parts where it inconveniences you least, but Mrs. Whitaker has answered." Thomas looked between them, realizing the porch had become less private and less manageable. Caleb stepped forward then, not in front of Hannah, but beside her. "You heard her," he said. His voice was calm, and the calm did more than anger could have. "This is my home. My mother is present. My nieces are present. Mrs. Whitaker is here under a practical arrangement. If she chooses to leave, I will drive her. If she chooses to stay until the bus runs, she stays. If either of you repeats otherwise, you will be correcting it publicly." Owen's face tightened. "That sounds like a threat." "No," Caleb said. "A correction." Ranger stood. Owen took 1 step back, which Hannah found satisfying and did not repent of. Thomas removed an envelope from his coat. "At least take this, for your travel." Hannah looked at it. Money, almost certainly. She thought of the $3 darkening in rain. She thought of the bills in her purse. Pride had limits. Foolish pride had even fewer uses. But this envelope was not repayment. It was hush money, wearing Sunday shoes. "No. Please, if you want to make amends, pay the church fellowship fund for winter lodging. Someone else may need help when the next storm comes." Mara's expression softened with surprise. Evelyn, from inside, said clearly, "Good." Thomas swallowed, then nodded. "I can do that." "Then do it." Hannah stepped back. "Good day, Mr. Reed."
The door closed before Owen could add another thought to the weather. For 3 seconds, the kitchen was silent. Then Lily's voice floated from the parlor vent. "Did she win?" June answered, "It was not a game." Lily replied, "She still won."
Evelyn covered her mouth. Caleb turned away, shoulders shaking once. Hannah stood with one hand on the doorframe, feeling the reaction arrive now that the confrontation was over. Not weakness. Delayed weather. Her knees seemed to remember they were made of something less solid than principle. Mara came in without comment, set down the basket, and took Hannah's cold hand between both of hers. "Well done. I am tired of well done," Hannah whispered before she could stop herself. "I would like things not to require doing quite so well." Mara squeezed her hand. "Amen to that." The day after Thomas left unfolded with an exhausted calm. Word would travel, it always did. But it would travel with witnesses now. Mara, Evelyn, Caleb, even Owen's offended silence. Hannah returned to work because work was where she placed feelings until they became safe to touch. She taught Caleb the invoice piles. He listened with unexpected seriousness, asking precise questions and writing notes in a small black notebook. He had a soldier's handwriting, blocky and direct, and wrote dates as if they might later testify. "You do not have to learn all of this today," she said. "If you leave Saturday, I have 2 days." The word leave crossed the table. Neither of them looked at it. "And if the bus does not run, then you have more time to suffer instruction." "I've had worse instructors." "That is not a compliment." "It may be the best I can do before noon." June spent the afternoon drawing Ranger on the porch with his body between Hannah and 2 faceless men. Lily named the picture "The Chairman Holds Court." Evelyn put it on the sideboard. Mara stayed for tea and told Evelyn she was thinking of starting a small Thursday gathering at the church for widows, veterans' families, and anyone who needed company without pity. Evelyn pretended to dislike the idea until she began suggesting what food should be served. A subplot opened itself quietly there without asking permission. Women who had been surviving separately, considering the dangerous kindness of surviving together. That evening, after the girls slept, Hannah stepped onto the porch for air. The storm had washed the sky clean enough to show one pale star between clouds. Caleb came out a moment later with 2 mugs of tea. He handed one to her. "I did not ask for tea." "No. Is this Ranger's influence he is expanding into beverage policy?" She took it. Their shoulders did not touch. The old lighthouse stood in the yard, dark but less accusing in the clear air. "Thomas will pay the church fund," Caleb said. "Mara called. He already brought money to Pastor Emmett's office." Hannah breathed out. "Good. You turned his mistake into shelter for someone else. I turned his money into something I could stand to look at." Caleb nodded. Still. The silence that followed was not empty. It had room in it. Hannah looked toward the lighthouse. "You said your friend Aaron would think you had lost your mind." Caleb's jaw shifted. He would have laughed first. "Tell me something about him that is not how he died." Caleb looked at her for a long time, then softly, "He sang Motown off-key before every mission because he said fear hated harmony." Hannah smiled. "Did it work?" "It annoyed fear and everyone else." Ranger came to the porch and leaned against Caleb. Caleb's hand found his head automatically. The star disappeared behind cloud. From upstairs came a child's sleepy cough, lighter now ordinary. Hannah lifted her mug. "To Aaron, then, and his terrible singing." Caleb looked out into the clean dark. "To Aaron." For the first time since she had arrived, the name did not sound only like a wound. It sounded also like a man who had lived. Saturday morning came bright enough to feel suspicious. Sunlight broke through the thin clouds and laid itself across Mercer Point in pale bands, turning puddles into scraps of sky
and lifting steam from the porch rails. The bay remained restless, but the storm had spent most of its anger. Roads were being cleared. The bus company had left a message saying limited service might resume by Monday if the causeway stayed open. Monday. Hannah heard the news while folding towels in the kitchen and felt the words settle into her body like a date on a notice she had known was coming but hoped the postman might misplace. She had arrived under emergency rules. Emergencies did not last forever. That was their mercy and their cruelty. Lily was much improved, which she proved by arguing that convalescence should include pancakes shaped like anything except medicine. June had placed 3 drawings on the sideboard: Ranger in court, the lighthouse, in rain, and the new one of Hannah standing in the kitchen with yellow light around her hands. The figure looked nothing like Hannah in face, but everything like how the child felt about her. Hannah had to look at it only briefly at a time. Too much would have undone her. Caleb spent the morning repairing a damaged window frame in the parlor while Ranger supervised from beneath a dust sheet. His movements were precise, patient, and competent in a way that made the room calmer. Hannah was sorting invoices at the table when a sharp crack sounded from outside. Not a gunshot, not anything so dramatic or dangerous, only a loose plank on the rescue shed slamming hard against the siding when the wind shifted. Still, the sound split the room. Caleb froze. The hammer slipped from his hand and struck the floor. Ranger was up before it finished falling, pressing against Caleb's leg, body braced. Lily stopped mid-sentence. June's pencil rolled from the table. Evelyn rose halfway from her chair and stopped, because Hannah had already seen the look in Caleb's eyes. He was in the room. He was not in the room. His gaze fixed past the wall, past the bay, past years. His breathing stayed controlled, but it was the wrong kind of control, the kind built to survive rather than return. No one moved. That was the gift Ranger gave them by moving first. The dog leaned his full weight against Caleb, then nudged his hand, then pawed once at his boot. Caleb did not respond. Hannah set the invoice down slowly. She did not touch him. She knew enough not to grab a person pulled into old danger by a new sound. She also knew silence could become another locked door. "Caleb," she said, voice low. No answer. "You are in the parlor at Mercer Point. The window frame is on the sawhorse. Ranger is against your leg. Lily is wearing 2 blue socks that do not match. June's pencil just rolled under the table, and your mother is about to pretend she was not worried." Evelyn's breath caught, then steadied. Ranger nudged Caleb again. Caleb blinked once. Hannah continued, still calm, still ordinary. "The sound was the shed plank. Wind from the west. No one is hurt. No one is waiting for you to be anything but here." His eyes shifted to Ranger, first, then the floor, then Hannah. Color returned to his face by degrees. He swallowed hard. "I'm here." "Yes," Lily whispered. "Uncle Caleb." His face changed with effort. He turned toward her. "I'm all right, little light." The nickname soothed her, though Hannah saw his hand tremble before he closed it. June slipped from her chair, retrieved the pencil, and placed it on the table without a word. Then she went to Ranger, touched the dog's back, and said, "Good job." Ranger accepted the praise with grave modesty. Evelyn sat down, her face pale but composed. "That plank has been loose for a week. I told you." Caleb gave a short, rough laugh that was nearly a breath. "You did. Next time, listen to your mother before weather has to repeat me." The ordinary scolding helped more than soft concern would have. It gave him a bridge back into family life, plank by plank. He picked up the hammer, set it on the table instead of trying to resume work, and looked at Hannah. Shame moved across his face, quick and familiar. Hannah disliked shame when it tried to eat courage. "Tea," she said. "For everyone." Lily raised a hand. "With biscuits for medical steadiness." "Naturally." In the kitchen, Caleb stood by the sink while Hannah filled the kettle. For a while, neither spoke. The girls were in the parlor with Evelyn, their voices low. Ranger lay across the threshold where he could monitor all his assigned humans. "I am sorry," Caleb said. "For what?" "Scaring them, scaring you. You did not choose the sound. I chose to bring it home." Hannah turned from the stove. "No. Something followed you home because you survived it. That is not the same thing."
He gripped the counter, looking down. "You sound certain." "I am certain grief lies. I am learning that fear does too." His eyes lifted. "From experience?" "From 2 years of waking at 3 in the morning, convinced I had forgotten some bill, some medicine, some final kindness that would have changed the ending. From learning my husband's absence could make a chair accuse me. From discovering that a kettle can sound like a hospital basin if the night is cruel enough." Caleb listened without interrupting. Outside, the loose plank slammed again, softer this time because the wind had turned. He flinched, but he stayed. Ranger lifted his head. Hannah did not comment. "Aaron was my best friend," Caleb said after a while. "He was more than that, really. Some men become brothers because paperwork says so. Some because the worst day of your life puts them next to you and they stay there. He stayed." Hannah leaned against the opposite counter, giving the words room. "You do not have to tell me the rest. I know." He looked toward the parlor. "I want to tell something else first. He had a daughter he talked about constantly, Nora. She was 4 then. He carried a drawing she made of a purple whale in his vest pocket, said it was a classified sea creature." Caleb's mouth moved with the memory. "He sang before missions, off-key. Ranger hated it. We all hated it. We let him because he said a man should leave behind something ridiculous in case he did not get to leave behind wisdom." Hannah smiled faintly. "That sounds like wisdom disguised very well." "He would like that." Caleb's hand found the edge of his watch. "This was his. His wife sent it to me after. I tried to send it back. She said Nora wanted Ranger to have it, but Ranger lacked wrists." Hannah laughed softly, and Caleb did too. The laughter hurt him a little. She could see it. It still counted. "I was there when he died," Caleb said, voice lower now, "but I am not going to tell you the details. They do not make him more real. They only make the pain louder." Hannah's respect for him deepened in that choice. "Then tell me what makes him real." Caleb looked toward the window. He once spent 2 hours teaching Ranger to balance a cracker on his nose because he said elite operators needed elite patience. Ranger ate 9 crackers and learned nothing. At the threshold, Ranger thumped his tail without opening his eyes. "That is slander," Hannah said. "It is documented." The kettle began to sing, not shrill, not accusing, just water coming ready. Hannah poured tea. "Aaron sounds loved." Caleb's face softened. "He was." "Then speak of him that way when you can. Not only as a place where the story ended." He took the mug she offered. Their fingers did not touch, both noticed, neither spoke of it. That afternoon, life returned by stubborn increments. Caleb fixed the loose plank with June holding the nail tin and Lily providing commentary from a chair near the door wrapped in a blanket, like a queen reviewing naval construction. Evelyn and Mara spoke by phone about the Thursday gathering, which had already become real enough to require arguments over whether pie was too cheerful for widows. Hannah updated the accounts and found a fuel overcharge from August that made Caleb mutter something about paper having teeth. The day warmed just enough to open windows for 10 minutes, and salt air moved through the house, carrying out the stale fear of the morning. Near sunset, Caleb asked Hannah if she wanted to see the lighthouse again. She almost said no because Monday sat inside her like a ticket already printed. Instead, she put on her coat. Ranger trotted ahead of them across the yard. The sky above the bay had turned a clear, washed blue, fading to rose near the horizon. Caleb unlocked the lighthouse and held the door. Inside, the air smelled of metal, old paint, and damp wood. This time they did not climb right away. Caleb opened a panel near the base and showed her the wiring, the careful repairs, the missing generator part sitting on a shelf wrapped in cloth. "You had it all along?" Hannah said. "I ordered it 6 months ago and did not install it. No. Because almost was safer." He nodded. "Almost cannot fail anyone, almost cannot guide anyone either." He looked at her, and the fading light through the small window caught the tired blue-gray of his eyes. "You speak like someone leaving soon." The sentence was quiet. Hannah felt it more than heard it. "The bus may run Monday, I know. That was the arrangement, I know that too." Ranger climbed 3 stairs and looked back at them as if disappointed in the pace of human honesty. Caleb leaned one shoulder against the wall. "If I asked you to stay longer because the house runs better with you in it, that would be unfair." Hannah's hands folded around each other. "It might be employment. If I asked because Lily and June trust you, that might be too much weight. It might be truth. If I asked because I sleep easier knowing Ranger chose you before I knew why, that would sound foolish. It might be Ranger's fault." He smiled, but it did not last. "If I asked because when that plank hit today you did not look at me like I was broken, I would not know what to call it." Hannah looked at the unlit lamp above them. "Bent is not broken," she said. Caleb closed his eyes briefly, receiving the words June had received. Outside, a truck engine sounded faintly from the lane. Ranger's body changed first, alert and forward. Caleb opened the lighthouse door and looked toward the house. A vehicle was coming, fast enough to throw water from the ruts. Hannah's chest tightened before she saw who it was. Owen Pike's truck stopped near the porch, and Thomas Reed stepped out beside him holding a pale envelope. Even from the lighthouse, Hannah could see the white shape in his hand. Money again, or something worse dressed as concern. Caleb's face hardened. Ranger gave one low warning huff. Hannah lifted her chin. "Apparently Monday has decided to arrive early." Caleb reached for the lighthouse key in his pocket, then stopped himself, choosing not to lock away the unfinished light before facing the unfinished trouble. Hannah noticed. So did Ranger. Across the yard, Thomas looked up and saw them standing together in the doorway of Mercy Light. Thomas Reed did not look like a villain when he crossed the yard toward the lighthouse. That was one of the harder truths Hannah had learned about harm in ordinary life. It often arrived combed, apologetic, embarrassed, and carrying an envelope. The sun had slipped behind thin cloud again, flattening the color from the grass and turning the puddles to pewter. Owen Pike remained by his truck, as if distance might make him appear less involved, though his eyes missed nothing. Thomas came slowly, his polished shoes darkening in the wet ground. "Mrs. Whitaker," he called, then stopped a few yards from the lighthouse door when Ranger stepped forward and sat down with regal inconvenience between them. Caleb stood beside Hannah, not touching her, not speaking over her, his stillness more eloquent than any warning. The unfinished light rose behind them. Hannah could feel its cold door at her back, the key in Caleb's pocket, the whole history of almost waiting above their heads. "Mr. Reed," she said, "you have already apologized." Thomas held up the envelope. "This is not only an apology, that is rarely a promising start." Owen shifted near the truck. Thomas glanced at him, then back at Hannah. "I heard what you suggested about the church fund. I made the payment. Good, but I also wanted to give you something directly. For travel, for whatever comes next." He offered the envelope. Hannah did not take it. The paper looked clean, dry, respectable. That made it worse. "Whatever comes next is not yours to finance." Thomas's face tightened with a flash of irritation before he covered it with regret. "You are making this more difficult than it needs to be." Caleb's jaw moved. Hannah held one hand slightly away from her side, a small signal she was not finished. Caleb remained quiet. "I have noticed," she said, "that people often say that
when they mean I am refusing to make their difficulty disappear. Thomas lowered the envelope. Carolyn is upset.
The town is talking. They believe I behaved dishonorably. They believe that because you did. Yes, but... He stopped hearing himself, too late. Owen came closer, unable to resist the moment. Mrs. Whitaker Thomas is trying to clean up an unfortunate situation. There's no call to keep punishing him. Hannah turned her gaze to Owen. Punishment would require more interest than I have. Ranger's tail tapped once against the threshold. It sounded like a gavel. Thomas took a breath. Please understand, if you remain here, people will continue to connect my name to yours and Caleb's. Caroline does not deserve that. Hannah felt a flicker of sympathy for Caroline, who had married a man with unfinished promises trailing behind him like loose rope. Then Thomas added, and frankly, neither do I. There it was. Not cruelty, perhaps. Something smaller and more common. Self-preservation wearing a borrowed coat of concern. Then say what you came to say, Hannah replied. Thomas looked toward Caleb. This arrangement could be misunderstood legally. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Careful. I am being careful, Thomas said quickly. That's the point. A woman arrives in town for one man and ends up housed by another with no written employment agreement, no wages recorded, no family connection. If someone asked whether she was free to leave, Caleb stepped forward one pace before Hannah could stop him, and Ranger rose with him. No one touched anyone. No threat was made. Still, Thomas lost color. Hannah spoke before fear could turn the moment into a story Owen would enjoy. I am free to leave. Of course, Thomas said. Then you will not imply otherwise again. Owen lifted both hands. Now nobody is implying you brought the implication in your truck, Hannah said. Do not pretend it walked here alone. Caleb looked at her then, and the anger in his face changed to something like fierce respect. Thomas swallowed. I only mean that if this continues, there could be questions. Authorities do not always understand nuance. A formal complaint can be difficult even when resolved. The words were mild. Their meaning was not. Hannah understood the shape of the threat perfectly. So did Caleb. So did Ranger, though perhaps by scent rather than syntax. From the house, the porch door opened. Evelyn came down the steps with Mara beside her, both women dressed as if they had decided the yard was a courtroom. Lily and June stood in the doorway behind them, despite instructions that had apparently been treated as suggestions. Evelyn's voice carried clearly. Thomas Reed, are you threatening my household because your conscience finally noticed you? Thomas turned. Mrs. Mercer, no. I am concerned. Concern is what decent people do before harm. Afterward, it is called cleanup. Mara stepped beside Hannah. And legal questions become simpler when witnessed by sensible people. I am a teacher, a church officer, and a taxpayer with excellent hearing. I heard Mrs. Whitaker state she is free to leave. I also heard you suggest complaint as leverage. Owen muttered, Mara, you're making it sound ugly. It sounded ugly before I organized it. Hannah nearly smiled. Thomas looked trapped now, and for one moment Hannah saw how the day might turn. Cornered embarrassment could lash out. Caleb seemed to sense it too, but the story remained safe because everyone present chose restraint. No one shouted. No one raised a hand. No one turned pain into spectacle. Thomas simply stood in the damp yard with his envelope and saw, perhaps for the first time, that Hannah was not alone enough to be rearranged. June slipped from the porch and walked to Caleb's side, then passed him to Hannah. She did not take Hannah's hand. She was 7, public and proud. Instead, she stood close enough that her sleeve brushed Hannah's skirt. Lily followed with less subtlety and took Hannah's hand outright. She can leave, Lily said, voice trembling but determined. But she doesn't have to leave because you feel weird. Evelyn closed her eyes. Mara looked away, composing herself. Caleb crouched slightly to Lily's level. Little light adults are handling this. I am assisting. You are doing that. Thomas stared at the child, and whatever defense he had prepared could not survive Lily's small fingers wrapped around Hannah's. He put the envelope back inside his coat. "I never meant to frighten anyone." Hannah's voice softened, not for him, but because the children were listening. "Then stop trying to move people with fear." The sentence crossed the yard and settled. Thomas nodded once, stiffly. "I will not file anything. I will not speak against this household," Mara said, "or Mrs. Whitaker." He looked at her. "Or Mrs. Whitaker," Evelyn added, "and you will correct Owen if he does." Owen drew himself up. "I have not," Ranger huffed. Owen stopped. Thomas turned toward Hannah. "I am sorry," he said again, and this time the words seemed smaller but more real because they had lost the ambition to solve anything for him. Hannah accepted that much. "I hope you learn from it." He nodded, then walked back to the truck. Owen lingered half a second, as if searching for a final phrase. Evelyn found one first. "Drive slowly. The lane has standards." When the truck left the yard did not erupt in triumph. Real relief rarely does. Lily started crying, furious at herself for it. June pressed both hands against her badge. Caleb stood very still, not because he did not feel, but because he felt too much in too many directions. Hannah bent and gathered Lily carefully, letting the child hide her face against her waist. "You did not have to assist," she whispered. "Yes, I did," Lily said into her skirt. "He was using his grown-up voice wrong." Hannah looked over Lily's head at Caleb. His eyes were bright and devastated. "She learned that somewhere," he said softly. "Children learn from rooms," Hannah replied. "This room is improving." They went inside because cold ground and high feelings were a poor combination. Evelyn made tea because some families prayed first, and some put kettles on, and the Mercers seemed to do both in that order only when the situation allowed. Mara wrote down what had happened, dated it, and had everyone adult sign as witnesses. Not because she expected trouble now, but because paper could be a fence when tongues got ambitious. Caleb watched Hannah sign her name. "We need a real agreement," he said. The room turned toward him. He did not look away. Employment, wages, room, duties, freedom to end it, written down. If Hannah wants it, and only if she wants it. The use of her first name landed quietly. Hannah noticed, so did Evelyn, who pretended to inspect a spoon. "That sounds sensible," Mara said. "It sounds overdue," Evelyn added. Hannah sat with Lily leaning against one side and June close on the other. Ranger stretched across the floor near her feet. Caleb at the opposite side of the table with his hands folded around a mug he had not drunk from. Monday waited somewhere down the road. The bus company had her name, perhaps. A seat could carry her south, away from gossip, away from complicated men, away from children who were already pressing themselves into the tender places of her life. A written agreement could keep her here with dignity instead of accident. It was practical. That made it more frightening, not less. "I will think about it tonight," she said. Caleb nodded as if he had expected no less. "Fair." Lily sat up. "Think about what?" June answered before anyone else could. "Whether she stays because she chooses." Lily looked at Hannah, eyes still damp. "Can we vote?" "No," Caleb, Evelyn, Mara, and Hannah said together. Ranger sneezed. Lily pointed at him. "The judge abstains," Hannah laughed, then helplessly, and the laughter broke the last hard shell of the afternoon. It did not solve anything. It did not decide Monday, but it proved something had survived the day without becoming bitter. That night, after the girls slept and Mara had gone home, Hannah sat alone in the guest room with the employment terms written in Caleb's blocky hand on the dresser. Room at Mercer Point, fair wages weekly. Duties, household accounts, meals, oversight of pantry care, support for Lily and June in coordination with Evelyn and Caleb. Freedom to leave with 1 week's notice or immediately in case of danger. Privacy respected. Reputation defended publicly.
The last line had been added by Evelyn, who said any agreement worth signing should have teeth. Hannah read it again and again. Outside Ranger settled in the hallway with a sigh. Beyond the window, the lighthouse remained dark. In the dark glass, Hannah saw her own face and did not recognize the woman looking back. She did not look rescued. She looked asked.
Hannah did not sign that night, though the pen lay beside the paper and the moon made a pale road across the floorboards. She opened the window a little and let the cold, salt air enter the room. It smelled of tide grass and wet cedar, not of bus stations or old promises. In Ohio, after her husband died, she had mistaken caution for wisdom because caution kept her alive. But caution, she was learning, could become a locked room if a person never checked whether the storm had passed. Down the hall, Lily murmured in sleep. June answered, still dreaming. Ranger sighed against the threshold, like a guard satisfied with the perimeter. Hannah touched the paper once, not signing, only acknowledging that it existed. Then she knelt beside the bed and prayed without polished words. She did not ask God to make the choice painless. She asked only for enough daylight to choose without lying to herself. Hannah did not sleep deeply that night, but the waking was different from the night she arrived. Then she had lain stiff in a stranger's guest room counting exits and regrets. Now she woke because a decision sat at the foot of the bed like a patient visitor. Rain had stopped completely. The house breathed in the quiet after storm boards, easing pipes ticking the bay, muttering beyond the yard. From the hall came Ranger's slow, steady breathing. Hannah turned her head and saw the employment agreement on the dresser, pale in the moonlight. Caleb's handwriting was severe and practical. Evelyn's added line about reputation looked darker because she had pressed the pen hard. Mara's witness note sat beneath it, tidy and ready. A paper fence, a paper door. Hannah thought of all the papers that had moved her life, a marriage certificate, a death certificate, a bill of debt, a newspaper advertisement, Thomas Reed's letters, a bus ticket softened by rain. Paper could betray. Paper could also tell the truth when people agreed to honor it. Before dawn, she rose, dressed, and went to the kitchen. The sky beyond the windows was black-blue, not yet morning, but no longer night. She built the fire, set coffee to brew, and began making dough with slower hands than usual. She was not delaying. She was giving the answer room to become fully daylight. Ranger came in, sat by the table, and watched the dresser drawer where the biscuits would eventually be hidden from him. "I am not bribing the court," she whispered. His ear flicked. Not before breakfast. Evelyn arrived first, tying her robe. She looked at Hannah, then the dough, then the clock. "You have the face of a woman who has already decided and is waiting for the sun to catch up." Hannah cut butter into flour. "Is that a known face? I wore it before marrying my husband, also before buying this house with him, also before telling a Navy doctor he was wrong and I was right, which he was and I was." Did the sun help? No. But it made the coffee visible. Hannah smiled. Evelyn poured 2 cups and sat. For a while they worked in companionable quiet, one woman making breakfast, the other warming her hands around a mug strong enough to anchor a boat. Then Evelyn said, "If you stay, do not stay for pity." "I know." "Do not stay because Lily cries, or June goes quiet, or Caleb looks at you like a man seeing shore after too long at sea." Hannah's hand paused. Evelyn did not apologize. "You noticed. I am old, not decorative. I would not stay for that." "Good. Stay because the work is real, the wages are fair, the room locks, the people are worth the trouble, and leaving would be less honest than remaining." Hannah looked at her. Evelyn's face was stern, but her eyes were kind, in the way winter sun is kind without softness, wasted. "And if I do not stay, then you leave with a packed lunch, your wages for the day's worked, And at least 3 women in this town ready to say Thomas Reed is a fool. Only 3? Mara is recruiting. They drank coffee. Caleb came in from outside as the first light entered the windows. He had been to the shed or the shoreline. His boots were damp, his coat smelled of cold salt air, and his hair was wind-roughened. He stopped when he saw Hannah and Evelyn at the table. The agreement lay between them now. No one had moved it there, or perhaps Hannah had and forgotten the motion. "Morning," he said. "Morning," Hannah replied. He poured coffee but did not sit until Evelyn pointed to a chair with the authority of a woman who had commanded patients and sons with equal efficiency. Lily and June stumbled in minutes later, still sleepy Lily wearing a blanket around her shoulders and June clutching the stuffed rabbit she pretended belonged only to her sister. Ranger positioned himself beneath the table where all verdicts could be monitored. Hannah placed biscuits on a plate. No one reached for them. The room understood something was waiting. Hannah folded her hands. They did not tremble, but they wanted to. "I have read the agreement," Caleb nodded. "If anything feels wrong, we change it. Something is missing." His face tightened. "What?" "My duties mention care support for Lily and June in coordination with you and Evelyn. That is correct. But if I am to help care for them, I will not be introduced as a temporary embarrassment or explained differently depending on who is listening." Caleb leaned forward. "Agreed. I want to be introduced publicly as house manager for Mercer Point, employed under written agreement with Mara as witness and Evelyn's full approval." Evelyn said, "You have more than approval. You have my better saucepan privileges." Lily whispered, "That is huge." Hannah kept going before tenderness could derail her. "I want wages written by week, not as needed. I want 1 afternoon each week for church errands Or my own correspondence. I want the right to refuse any task involving business with Thomas Reed." Caleb's mouth moved at one corner. "Strongly agreed. And I want it clear that if I stay as Hannah Whitaker, not as your sister's replacement, not as the woman Thomas discarded, not as someone the town gets to define before I do." Caleb's eyes held hers. "Yes. Then I will stay for 30 days and review the arrangement after that." Lily inhaled like a church organ. June sat very still. Evelyn closed her eyes. Caleb did not speak immediately. That too mattered. He did not seize the answer as if it belonged to him. He let it stand. 30 days, he said. With review. With review. Lily burst from her chair and threw her arms around Hannah's waist so fast Ranger stood in alarm. "This is not a vote," Caleb warned, but his voice had broken enough that the warning lacked force. June approached more slowly. She held out the badge. Hannah looked down. "Do you want me to fix it again?" June shook her head. "No, I want you to pin it straight." Evelyn turned away toward the stove. Caleb looked at the window. Hannah fastened the badge carefully to June's sweater, straight this time. June touched it, then leaned forward and pressed her forehead briefly against Hannah's arm. That was all. It was everything. By 10 o'clock, Mara had arrived with a proper ink pen 2 copies of the agreement and a lemon cake because paperwork without cake invites despair. The agreement was signed at the kitchen table. Hannah's hand did shake then, but only slightly. Caleb signed after her, then Evelyn, then Mara as witness. Lily wanted Ranger's paw print included. Caleb said no. Mara said a paw print might complicate legal standing. Lily said that was discrimination against judges. June drew a small lighthouse in the corner of her own scrap of paper and called it the family copy. After lunch, they drove into town together because Hannah had insisted that the public introduction happen before Rumor had another day to rehearse. Caleb drove the truck. Evelyn sat beside him like a general. Hannah sat in the back with Lily and June Ranger between them, taking up more than his negotiated share of space. Cape Charles looked washed clean and nosy. People paused at storefronts. The marine supply bell gave its thin ring when they entered Pike's. Owen stood behind the counter, saw the entire Mercer party, and seemed briefly to consider hiding behind a display of rope. Caleb spoke first. "Morning, Owen." Caleb. His eyes moved to Hannah. "Mrs. Whitaker." "Mrs. Whitaker has accepted employment as house manager at Mercer Point," Caleb said evenly. "Written agreement witnessed by Mara Jennings. My mother's approval. 30-day term to start. We are here for supplies and to post a notice for anyone needing storm repairs to call the shed instead of bothering my mother." Owen's face performed several small weather patterns. Hannah stood beside Caleb, not behind him. Evelyn added, "You may also tell anyone curious that I am delighted, which is more than I can say about the quality of twine you sold me last month." Mara, who had arrived separately and with impossible timing, entered behind them. "And the church lodging fund is now open for winter emergencies, thanks to an anonymous donation everyone knows about." Two women near the bait freezer turned to look. One of them, a round-faced woman with silver glasses, stepped forward. "I'm Ruth Ann Bell, Tom's wife. My husband said you got our Caleb's books in order before the storm finished dripping." Hannah smiled. "I made a start." "Good, maybe you can teach him receipts are not decorative." Caleb sighed. This is becoming a theme. The woman shook Hannah's hand warmly. A second woman introduced herself. Owen processed the supply order in near silence, which was the finest music Hannah had heard from him. At the church, Pastor Emmett agreed to post the winter lodging notice. Mara introduced Hannah to two widows and one retired Coast Guard wife, who looked her over, approved of her shoes, and told her where to buy decent thread. No one solved the town in one morning. Gossip did not die because truth entered a room. But truth had witnesses now. It had names. It had paper. It had Evelyn's saucepan privileges and Mara's cake and June's straight badge. On the drive home, Lily talked without pausing about how Hannah had been introduced like a president but with biscuits. June rested against Ranger. Caleb drove with one hand on the wheel, the other near the old watch. Hannah looked out at the bay gray-blue and opening, and felt fear and peace sitting side by side inside her without fighting. At Mercer Point, the lighthouse waited. Caleb carried supplies to the shed while Hannah unpacked pantry goods. Near sunset, he found her on the porch. "Thank you for making us do it properly," he said. "Properly protects everyone. It also announces things a man might have kept quiet because he was afraid to want them." Hannah looked at him. "Caleb." He shook his head, not refusing, only asking for a moment. "I know. 30 days, employment, review. I can honor the lines." "Can you?" "Yes." He looked toward the lighthouse. "I spent years learning perimeters. Maybe now I learn thresholds." The sentence stayed with her after he went to the shed. That night, while Hannah helped June put away drawings, and Lily argued that the agreement should include pancake shapes, the phone rang. Caleb answered in the kitchen. His voice changed on the second sentence, clipped and focused, but not panicked. "Say again?" Everyone looked up. Ranger rose. Caleb listened, then said, "We'll respond." He hung up and turned toward the room. "Small boat outside the South Channel. Engine trouble. Family aboard. Coast Guard is delayed with another call. Tom Bell is meeting me at the shed." Lily's face went pale. June's hand found the badge. Hannah looked toward the window where the lighthouse stood dark in the falling evening. Caleb reached for his coat, then stopped and met Hannah's eyes. The old fear was there, but this time it was not alone. Hannah handed him the red rescue pack herself. Their fingers brushed, this time, briefly, with no one pretending not to notice. "Come back slow, if slow is safer," she said. Caleb nodded, and the instruction seemed to settle him more than any brave farewell could have. "Keep the radio loud," he told Evelyn. "Keep the girls from inventing nautical strategy." Lily objected from the table. June did not. She was watching Hannah watch Caleb. Ranger pressed against the door, torn between command and instinct,
and the whole house held still while Caleb stepped into the dark with the fear beside him, not hidden, not ruling, just present.
Evening dropped quickly over Mercer Point, clear at the horizon, but bruised with weather farther out, the kind of sky sailors studied without trusting. The rescue call changed the house the way a bell changes a church. Every person became more themselves. Caleb moved with calm speed, pulling on his coat, checking the small radio clipped at his belt, scanning the shelf near the back door for the kit he needed. Ranger stood pressed to his side, tail low, eyes bright. Evelyn pushed herself up from the table despite her hands. "South Channel, just outside. Family of 4, maybe 5. Engine trouble taking on some water according to the call, but they are stable for now." His words were careful because the girls were listening. Stable for now. Hannah heard the safe shape of it and respected him for choosing it. He did not make the danger larger to feed adrenaline. He did not make it smaller to protect them from truth. Lily clutched the blanket she had been wearing all day. "Do you have to go?" Caleb crouched in front of her. "Yes." "Because they need help and we know how to give it." June stood beside Hannah, silent. Caleb looked at her too. "I am taking Tom Bell and the right gear. Coast Guard knows. I will check in by radio. Ranger—" He stopped because Ranger had already taken the old red rescue pack from its hook in his mouth and was dragging it toward the door. Evelyn said, "That dog has more sense than half the county." Caleb took the pack, then hesitated. "Ranger stays." The dog's ears went back. "Weather is shifting. I need you here with the girls." Ranger did not agree. That was plain. He looked at Caleb, then Hannah, then the door caught between two duties no command could make simple. Hannah knelt and placed one hand near his shoulder, not gripping. "You heard him. Guard the house." Ranger stared at her, as if evaluating whether she had authority to repeat orders. Then he pressed his head briefly against her chest and returned to Caleb, who touched the scarred ear with 2 fingers. "Stay, buddy." He left with the pack. Tom Bell's truck lights swept the yard moments later, then moved toward the shed. The sound of engines starting carried across the damp air, then faded toward the marina. The house felt suddenly too large. Evelyn went straight to the radio set in the kitchen and adjusted the dial with practiced hands. "We listen, but we do not hover over it like mourners," she said. Lily June set the table for tea. "Hannah, if you still know where you put those ginger biscuits, now would be the moment." "I know exactly where I hid them." "Of course you do. You have the discipline of a quartermaster and the moral flexibility of a grandmother." Lily managed a weak laugh. "Work again." Hannah understood Evelyn's method now. Fear was not denied. It was given a chair and a task, but not the head of the table. Mara arrived 15 minutes later, having heard the call through Tom's wife, carrying a bag of apples and a hymnal. "I brought supplies for waiting," she said. "Apples and hymns?" Lily asked. "Both improve if shared, and neither requires the stove." June took the hymnal and held it like a shield. Ranger lay at the back door, nose inches from the crack, refusing biscuits and comfort. That frightened the girls more than any adult expression could have. Hannah sat on the floor beside him. "He is listening," she told them. "That is his work." Lily sat near Ranger's back and put one hand on his fur. "Can work make you less scared?" "Sometimes," Hannah said. "Sometimes it just keeps fear from driving." Evelyn looked at her from the radio and nodded once. The first check-in came 20 minutes later. Caleb's voice, rough with static, but steady. "Mercer Point to base. We have visual. Vessel near South Channel marker. Conditions moderate. Proceeding with caution." Evelyn pressed the button. "Base receiving." "House is steady. Girls are eating apples under protest." Lily shouted, "Not protest." Caleb's laugh crackled through small and distant. "Copy that." The sound eased the room by inches. Hannah cut apples, Mara hummed softly, and June drew without looking at the page.
Outside, the lighthouse stood dark against the violet sky. Hannah kept glancing at it. The thought came once, then returned with insistence. A light did not rescue a boat by itself, but it told people where home stood. At the second check-in, static swallowed half of Tom's report. No details of danger came through, only enough to know the work was careful and ongoing. Evelyn's face remained composed. Her hands did not. Hannah moved the teacup closer so she would not have to reach. Evelyn noticed and allowed it. That was their language now. 30 minutes passed. Then Ranger stood so suddenly Lily slid sideways. The dog went to the shelf near the door and began pawing at a small yellow case tucked behind coiled twine.
Evelyn frowned. "What is he doing?" Hannah crossed to him. Ranger nudged the case, then looked toward the marina. Printed on the side in worn letters were "Spare Signal Battery." Evelyn's face changed. "Caleb forgot the backup." "Does he need it?" Lily asked. Evelyn did not answer quickly enough. Mara stood. "Can Tom's wife get it to the marina?" "Road is passable but slow," Evelyn said, "and the launch is already out." Ranger barked once, sharp and rare. Hannah picked up the case. "Can the lighthouse use this?" Evelyn stared at her. "What?" "Caleb said the lens is set, wiring almost done. Missing generator part in the shed. If the lighthouse can be lit from here, would it help them see the point?" Evelyn's mind moved fast. Hannah saw the nurse and mechanic's wife inside her align. "Maybe. Not as navigation official, but as a reference. The old circuit can run on auxiliary if the converter still works." "Where is it?" "In the lighthouse cabinet," if Caleb did not hide it from himself. Ranger was already at the door. "Girls, stay with Mara," Evelyn said. Lily protested. Evelyn cut her off. "This is not a vote." Hannah grabbed her coat, the battery case, and the ring of keys Caleb had left on the hook. Ranger led the way across the yard, Evelyn behind, despite the pain, Hannah carrying the case against her side. The air had turned colder. At the lighthouse, the door stuck until Hannah lifted the handle, the way Caleb had taught her for the guest room lock. The detail made her heart twist. Inside smelled of damp metal and waiting. Evelyn directed from the base, voice sharp and sure. Hannah opened the cabinet, found the converter, passed wires down, followed instructions exactly, asked twice when unsure, guessed never. This was not a dramatic act of reckless courage. It was careful work done by frightened people who refused to become foolish. Ranger climbed halfway up the stairs, then back down, impatient but disciplined. At last, Evelyn said, "Switch." Hannah climbed to the glass room. The bay lay dark beyond, scattered with small official lights and moving shadows. Far out she saw a faint blink that might have been a boat, or her own hope. The switch under her hand was stiff. Caleb had said it stuck. Almost can last years if a man is stubborn enough. Hannah wrapped her fingers around it and pushed. Nothing happened. Below, Evelyn swore softly enough that it remained between her and God. Hannah tried again, not harder, differently, easing the pressure upward first, then down. The switch gave with a click that sounded too small for what followed. Mercy light came alive. Warm gold filled the glass room, struck the wet yard, reached across the dark water in a turning sweep that made the whole point seem to inhale. Hannah stood inside the light, with her hand still on the switch, laughing once in disbelief, crying without planning to, both safely hidden by brightness. Ranger barked, not a warning this time, but a declaration. From the house Lily and June cheered so loudly even the bay might have heard. Evelyn leaned against the wall at the base of the stairs and covered her face. "Stubborn man," she whispered. "You finished it and never let it shine." The radio crackled from the kitchen faint through the open door, and Yard Mara's voice relaying because she had run to the set. "Caleb sees the light. Repeat, Caleb sees Mercy light." Hannah descended so fast she nearly missed the last step. Evelyn was laughing and crying, which she would later deny with medical authority.
They hurried back to the house. Mara held the radio. Caleb's voice came through, broken by static and wind, but clear enough. Mercer Point light is visible. Good reference. We have the family transferred, returning slow. No one cheered immediately. They breathed first. Then Lily sobbed. June dropped her pencil. Evelyn sat down hard and Hannah gripped the counter with both hands. Returning slow, safe enough.
Safe enough was a hymn when sung by radios. It took another 40 minutes for the rescue vehicle lights to appear near the shed. By then, the lighthouse turned, steadily washing the yard in gold every few seconds. Hannah stood on the porch with Evelyn, Mara, Lily June, and Ranger, who had finally abandoned discipline and was vibrating with the need to see Caleb. The truck stopped. Tom Bell climbed out first and waved. Caleb followed, soaked, exhausted, alive. No dramatic wounds, no spectacle. Just a man who had done dangerous work carefully and come home to find the light he had refused himself shining. Ranger reached him in 3 strides and nearly knocked him backward. Caleb dropped to one knee, burying his hand in the dog's wet fur. Then he looked up at the lighthouse. The beam passed over his face and something in him opened with visible pain and wonder. "Who turned it on?" he asked, though his eyes had already found Hannah. Lily shouted, "The judge found the battery," June added. "Hannah listened to Grandma," Evelyn corrected. "Hannah did the work." Hannah stood on the porch with her coat unbuttoned, hair loose from the wind, hands smelling faintly of metal and dust. "You had already fixed it," she said. "It only needed permission." Caleb rose slowly. He crossed the yard, stopped at the foot of the porch, and looked at her as if every line he had drawn around his life had become visible in gold light and less necessary than he remembered. "I don't know if I am good enough to be home for anyone," he said quietly, too low for the girls, but not for Hannah. She stepped down one stair. Ranger stood between them, tail moving. "Then start with coming back," she said. "You did that tonight." The light turned again warm across the wet grass, across Evelyn's tear-bright face, across Lily and June holding hands without noticing, across Mara whispering a prayer of thanks. Caleb looked toward the bay, then back at Hannah. For the first time, mercy light shone behind him instead of above him, and he did not turn away. Inside, Evelyn made everyone drink something warm before feelings could turn dramatic. Tom Bell called his wife. Mara led a short prayer that thanked God for steady hands, working radios, stubborn dogs, and lights turned on before anyone was ready. Caleb stood beside the window long after the others had moved away, watching the beam cross the yard again and again. Hannah stood near him, not speaking. After a while he said, "I thought finishing it would prove I was healed." "Maybe finishing it proves you are willing," she said. He looked at her. The light passed over them both, and willingness, though quieter than healing, felt like the beginning of something strong enough to last. Spring did not arrive in Cape Charles all at once. It came the way trust had come to Mercer Point, in small proofs repeated until even the cautious heart had to admit a pattern. First, the mornings lost their bite. Then the marsh grass took on a green edge, shy at the roots. Then the boats at the marina began moving with purpose instead of endurance, and the gulls returned to arguing over pilings as if they had personally invented the season. By March, Mercy Light turned every evening at dusk, a warm gold sweep across the yard, and the water beyond no longer an apology and not quite a boast. Caleb had installed a proper power system in January, filed the county paperwork in February, and endured Lily's suggestion that the lighthouse be renamed Hannah's Very Excellent Lamp with more patience than the proposal deserved. The official name remained Mercy Light. The unofficial name depended on who was speaking. Evelyn called it Your Grandfather's Stubbornness Finally Behaving. Mara called it A Sermon with Wiring. June called it The Way Home. Ranger, who had done more than anyone to bring the matter to conclusion, continued to call it nothing and accepted ginger biscuits as ongoing compensation.
Hannah's 30-day agreement had been reviewed on schedule, then renewed for 90 days, then folded into a life so gradually that the paperwork became less a fence than a foundation. She was house manager of Mercer Point in truth now, not merely in ink. The pantry stayed ordered, the invoices no longer bred in drawers, the rescue shed had a proper logbook and labels that made Tom Bell whistle in admiration and Caleb mutter that Hannah had militarized the paper goods. A retired Navy SEAL complaining about order is rich soil, she told him. I respect order, Caleb replied. I fear labels written by a woman who knows where everything is. That is wisdom. That is surveillance. Ranger sneezed, and Lily declared the judge sided with Hannah.
The girls changed, too. Lily became louder, if such a thing could be imagined, but the loudness no longer carried the same frantic edge. She asked questions because she loved answers, not because silence frightened her. June still spoke less than her sister, but her quiet had opened windows. She drew Mercy Light again and again, sometimes with Ranger in the foreground, sometimes with Evelyn in the kitchen, sometimes with Caleb standing at the base looking upward, sometimes with Hannah in the glass room turning the switch. One drawing showed her mother as a small gold star above the lighthouse, not gone, not trapped, simply shining from another part of the same sky. Caleb had looked at that one for a long time. He did not hide his tears from June. He did not make a speech either. He pulled her close, kissed the top of her head, and said, "She would love how you see things." June had nodded, accepting the sentence as a gift she intended to keep. Evelyn's hands still hurt, but she let them hurt honestly now. That was not a cure, but it was a form of peace. Mara's Thursday gathering at the church had begun with 6 women, 2 veterans, 1 retired Coast Guard wife, 3 casseroles, and a silence everyone was too polite to name. By spring, it had become the warmest hour in town. People came who did not know whether they belonged, and discovered belonging sometimes started with being handed a plate. Thomas Reed paid the lodging fund quietly every month after that first donation. Caroline came once to the gathering, sat near the back, and cried into a napkin while Mara spoke with her afterward. Hannah did not become friends with her, not exactly, but she stopped imagining Caroline only as the woman in the green scarf. Life was rarely kind enough to make everyone simple. Owen Pike remained Owen Pike, which was both his crime and his sentence, but even he learned to speak more carefully when Hannah entered the marine supply store. Evelyn had publicly returned the bad twine and privately praised his improved discretion, which, from Evelyn, counted as a peace treaty. The bus did run again. Many buses ran. Hannah watched the first one pass through town in December while standing beside Caleb outside the post office, an envelope of her own letters in her hand. She felt the old road call to the old fear. South, it whispered. Elsewhere. A clean start. No children depending. No man with haunted eyes making room for you at the table. No dog who sleeps against your door as if your safety is a matter settled by committee. Caleb had not asked what she was thinking. He had learned something about thresholds. He stood beside her with his hands in his coat pockets and let the bus go by. After it passed, he said, "Some doors close loud. Some lights wait." Hannah looked at him then, because the sentence had become theirs without either of them deciding it. "Did Aaron teach you that?" "No." "Your grandfather?" "No." He looked almost embarrassed. "You did." She had no answer that would not reveal too much too soon, so she mailed her letters and went home. Home. The word had frightened her at first. She used it privately, then accidentally, then finally without apology. Home was not the absence of grief. Caleb still had bad nights. Hannah still woke sometimes, reaching for a life that had ended in Ohio. Evelyn still spoke to her late husband while searching for misplaced spectacles. Lily and June still had days when missing their mother made them sharp around the edges. But grief no longer sat alone in the largest chair. It had to share space with pancakes, invoices, school books, rescue calls, Mara's Thursday gathering, Ranger's judicial misconduct, and Mercy Light turning faithfully at dusk.
Love, Hannah learned, did not erase the old rooms inside a person. It opened windows. In April, Mercer Point hosted the first spring supper for the church lodging fund. It was Evelyn's idea and Mara's organization, which meant half the town arrived with food, and the other half arrived with opinions that were soon assigned tasks. Long tables were set in the yard between the house and the lighthouse. Fishermen, widows, veterans, children, church ladies, mechanics, and 2 Coast Guard officers stood in the soft evening air, eating stew, cornbread, lemon cake, and Hannah's ginger biscuits. Thomas and Caroline came briefly, left a donation, and departed without incident. Owen helped Tom Bell hang lanterns and complained only twice, which Mara called spiritual growth. Lily led a group of children on an unauthorized tour of the porch, stopping at the door to announce that Ranger was head of security and Hannah was head of everything else. June displayed drawings near the sideboard inside, including one new picture of the entire household standing beneath Mercy Light. In the drawing, Caleb and Hannah were not holding hands. They were standing close enough that the space between them looked intentional. Evelyn saw it and said nothing, which was more dangerous than comment. As dusk settled, Caleb climbed the lighthouse stairs to turn on the lamp. He had done it every evening for months, but tonight he paused at the base and looked back at Hannah. She stood near the table, folding a towel that did not need folding. He saw the motion and smiled. She saw him see it and stopped. Ranger trotted from Caleb to Hannah and back again, impatient with delays in human courage. "Would you come up?" Caleb asked. The yard noise softened around the question, not because everyone heard, but because the world sometimes knows when to lower its voice. Hannah wiped her hands and crossed to him. They climbed together. At the top, the glass room held the last blue of evening. Below, the tables glowed with lanterns. Lily was explaining something with both hands. June stood beside Evelyn, showing Mara a drawing. Ranger had refused to climb all the way and waited halfway down, offended but dignified. Caleb stood by the switch. "I have been trying to think of the right way to ask you something," he said. "That sounds like a dangerous hobby." "It is. I am not good at it. You are better when you stop trying to sound prepared." He let out a breath. "Then I will be unprepared." He looked at her, and the old guardedness was there, but not ruling him. "Stay after the 90 days. Not because the house needs you, though it does. Not because the girls love you, though they do. Not because Ranger will make my life unbearable if you leave, though he absolutely will. Stay because I would like to build whatever comes next with you. Honestly, slowly, with every paper signed and every door open." Hannah felt the words move through her like light through glass. "Caleb, I am not asking you to replace anyone. I am not asking you to heal what I refuse to face. I am not asking from loneliness only, though I have been lonely. I am asking because when you are in a room, I want to become the kind of man who tells the truth in it." The yard below blurred. Hannah looked out across the bay. She thought of Thomas Reed's letters burning in the stove, of $3 in rain, of June's bent badge, Lily's fever, Evelyn's coffee, Mara's hat, Ranger's paw on her suitcase, Caleb frozen by a sound and then laughing about Aaron's terrible singing. She thought of her first husband with tenderness, not as a chain, but as a chapter blessed and finished. She thought of how frightened she had been of wanting something that could be lost. Then Ranger barked from the stairs, one sharp reminder that the court disliked excessive delay. Hannah laughed through tears. "The judge is impatient. He has been from the beginning." She turned to Caleb. "Yes," she said, "but slowly, honestly, with every door open." Caleb's face changed in a way she would remember all her life. He did not grab her. He did not make the moment a claim. He took her hand, giving her time to withdraw, and when she did not, he held it like a vow, still learning its words. Together they turned on Mercy Light.
Gold swept across the yard below, and Lily looked up first. She shouted something Hannah could not hear through the glass, but she saw June smile. Evelyn press a hand to her heart, Mara lift both arms in victory, and Ranger charge down the stairs as if personally responsible for the entire outcome. The light moved over the tables, the house, the rescue shed, the wet shine of the bay, and the road that had once threatened to carry Hannah away. It did not erase the storms that had brought them there. It gave them shape. It showed the shore. Later, when the guests had gone and the girls were asleep, Hannah stood in the kitchen with the last towel finally folded and the smell of ginger coffee and salt air around her. Caleb came in carrying 2 mugs. Ranger settled by the door. Evelyn hummed somewhere down the hall. Mercy light turned beyond the window, steady and warm. Hannah placed both hands on the kitchen counter the same way she had done in other rooms when trying not to fall apart. This time she was not holding herself together against loss. She was feeling the weight of being gathered. She had not been rescued from the storm like a helpless thing lifted from a roadside. She had walked through it, with wet shoes, a sharp tongue, a stubborn heart, and enough faith to accept the next right door when it opened. She was home. And this time, if storms came again, there would be light enough for all of them to find each other. Sometimes God does not answer a broken heart by sending an easy road. Sometimes he sends a porch light in a hard rain, a faithful dog who refuses to move a child who asks the question everyone else is afraid to ask, or a stranger who stands beside you without taking your voice away. Hannah's story reminds us that being hurt does not mean we are finished, and being afraid does not mean we lack faith. Healing often begins with one honest decision, one safe room, one person who keeps their word, and one small light turned on at the right time. If this story touched your heart, write Amen in the comments and share it with someone who needs to remember that closed doors are not the end of God's mercy. May your home be filled with patience, courage, forgiveness, and the kind of love that helps people find their way back through the storm. Subscribe for more stories of hope, loyalty, and second chances.